Unfortunately, his luck took a turn for the worse as he once again misjudged the direction, stumbling into a crevice that devoured him whole, leaving no trace behind, except for his demise. The Wood King from the Yu Kingdom vanished from then on. The Yu Kingdom's ranks dwindled once more. Meanwhile, both the outer and inner teams within the infinite great world continued to diminish. Several universe masters of the Fourth Tribulation fell. The tasks assigned by the ancient Wood sect this time were unusually numerous. Many people spared no effort in their endeavors. Naturally, casualties were abundant. However, no universe master of the Fifth Tribulation had yet fallen. There were few dangers in the outer regions that could threaten universe masters of the Fifth Tribulation. As for the Sixth Tribulation level of savage beasts, there were probably none in the outer regions, perhaps a few in the inner regions, but the chance of encountering them was even lower than becoming a Sixth Tribulation being. In the core region, there might be quite a few Sixth Tribulation savage beasts. But nearing the end, no one would venture around aimlessly. They would all be focused on reaching the finish line. Their opportunities lay in the outer and inner regions. In the core zone, even a slight misstep could lead to the downfall of a universe master of the Fifth Tribulation. No one dared to linger. Everyone pressed forward with all their might. Many found themselves trapped in dire situations. Just like Jian Wushuang and his companions, caught between a rock and a hard place. Beneath the river's surface, amidst the chaotic water grass, numerous aquatic serpents writhed, their powers insignificant, their divine strength not even reaching 10,000. Yet, despite their feebleness, as long as they were savage beasts, they could survive underwater. Among these serpents, there was a current of air, constantly swirling. I can't believe it didn't take the bait. Jian Wushuang sighed, deciding to give up. Among the aquatic serpents, there was a Fourth Tribulation savage beast, with divine strength of around 500,000. He had initially intended to lure the opponent into his trap using those serpents. However, the savage beast paid no attention whatsoever. A direct confrontation was possible, and he had the capability to kill the savage beast, but it would consume a considerable amount of time. By the time he finished, the dragon would likely find him, and escape would be difficult. Now he had collected materials from over a dozen wild beasts. It was probably enough. He was ready to return to the rubble heap, refine the conversion pills, and then quickly leave this riverbank with Jinchen. The farther, the better. That dragon snake would probably set its sights on the rubble heap soon. Escaping alone posed no problem for him, but bringing Jincheng along would be tricky. Plus, he still had to find Wu Li. Without Wu Li, he couldn't activate the Wanyan formation. He regretted not stopping Wu Li from going. Now he was in quite a passive situation. Dodging past the wild beasts overhead, Jian Wushuang's figure trembled, and with just a few breaths, he traversed space and returned to the rubble heap. After twisting and turning through the cracks in the rocks, he entered a stalactite cave through a hole. Splash! The sound of breaking the water's surface nearly startled the two Li family universe masters into action. But upon seeing it was Jian Wushuang, they breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing him return, Li Shang, who was cross-legged recovering his power, also opened his eyes. "It seems your recovery is going well," Jian Wushuang said. Li Shang smiled awkwardly. At the sacred assembly, who wouldn't have some treasures to restore their divine power? This time, he had almost exhausted all his treasures trying to recover from his injuries. Yet he still couldn't reach his peak. "Friend Wushuang, how are your preparations?" Li Shang's tone was flat, not daring to be presumptuous anymore. Now he could barely protect himself, let alone look after the two juniors of his family. He couldn't afford to offend Jian Wushuang. They were now relying entirely on Jian Wushuang to refine the pills and ensure their safety here while waiting for news from the Empress. Jian Wushuang casually found a flat place to sit cross-legged and said calmly, "The materials are enough. Let's see how lucky we are this time." With the materials obtained this time, he could try twice more. If the third attempt succeeded, then everyone would get a conversion pill. Of course, he didn't need one. There were still 4 others here, plus Wu Li. He had to refine 5 of them. In the order he intended to preserve, the first was Wu Li, and only then Jinchen. The rest were not prioritized. He would decide based on his preference. Li Shang's eyes held a world weariness, reminiscing that just a few days ago, he was full of spirit, but now he appeared so battered. All those familiar faces, one by one, had fallen. Compared to them, the Li family's plight was even worse. Of the 4 great titans, only 3 had arrived. All had fallen. In the end, all the struggles led to nothing but downfall. Only those stronger could protect themselves. If blame were to be assigned, it would be to his own lack of strength. Now his greatest aspiration was not to contend, but to preserve the hope of his family. Then I'll trouble Taoist Jian Wushuang. If I succeed, my Li family will surely offer gratitude and pay a visit. Li Shang lowered his stance to the utmost. He hoped Jian Wushuang could succeed in refining. Jinshan's strength was meager, unaware of what was happening outside. Yet, she could surmise that those who had left might never return. Then there were the 2 universe masters of the Li family. Both were prodigies, but in the face of true opportunity, their family provided no shelter. They were left out in the cold. Ridiculous, pitiful, lamentable. Jian Wushuang paid no attention to them, starting to refine the conversion pill alone. At his level, alchemy required a pill furnace. All he needed to do was to refine the materials and throw them into the origin source. There was nothing stronger than the origin source. The first attempt. He needed to harmonize the yin and yang, just like merging water and fire origins. But the difference between humans and savage beasts was not comparable to water and fire. He had experimented numerous times with death and life. Combining the human race with savage beasts wasn't particularly difficult for him. It was the details that proved trickier. A slight mistake could mean starting over from scratch. If only the external pressure wasn't so intense. He could have easily conducted over 10,000 experiments. With enough practice, he could ensure success every time. But now, time and circumstances didn't afford him that luxury. He had to complete it as quickly as possible. Failure. The first failure didn't surprise him. It was expected. For one of the crucial steps in refining the transformation pill, he needed at least 3 attempts. The first failure was acceptable, but he wouldn't allow a second. He refused to believe that luck could be so bad as to fail twice out of 3. The second attempt succeeded as expected. He continued refining, all the way to the final step, choosing 1 out of 9. According to his experience, he could eliminate the 6 least probable paths, leaving him with 3 choices. However, this time the probability of the 3 choices was only 10%, because it was also possible that he had eliminated the 9 paths. That was the most difficult part, but he only had 1 more chance to try. I cannot fail. Unfortunately, some things often didn't go as planned, and he failed again, watching half of the materials go to waste. Even if he succeeded on the 3rd attempt, it wouldn't be enough for their group. But now there was no other way. They could only grit their teeth and continue. If necessary, they would have to venture outside and slaughter some savage beasts. Taking advantage of the fact that the dragon had not yet searched this place, he still had some time. This is the last chance. He threw all the materials into the origin source in a backward motion, refining step by step. It went extremely smoothly, and now it was the crucial final step. This time he couldn't afford to fail. After a long preparation, he finally made the ultimate decision. The blue origin source swayed for a moment and began to condense into pills. Success or failure depended on their efficacy. Buzz! A demonic aura surged, and Jian Wushuang's face lit up with joy. It worked! Several pills floated in the origin source starry sky, and he grabbed them all at once. Whoosh! His consciousness returned to his true self, and he stood up directly. Phew! He let out a sigh of relief. This time he had finally succeeded. Although there were only 4 pills, as long as he had the formula and successfully refined pills, he could refine them again. There were also exactly 4 people here. Originally, he intended to leave one for Wu Li, but since he couldn't find him for a while, he could only give them to the others first. He could refine one for Wu Li when he found him later. It was a trivial matter. Each person gets 1. Take it. Jian Wushuang handed out pills to everyone. Jinchen held the somewhat hot pill, hesitating. After the transformation, can't we turn back to humans? But Li Shang, as always, was decisive, without hesitation. He hadn't expected Jian Wushuang to give each of them a pill, and without hesitation, they all swallowed it. As the pill entered their bodies, their essences began to change shortly after. The power of their origin source didn't diminish, but its upper limit decreased. However, their divine power continued to grow stronger. Sharp antennae sprouted from Li Cheng's body. The row of antennae on his back seemed to be those of an ancient dragon. Among the materials used to refine the pills was the origin source of an ancient dragon. And there were also mermaid components. Li Cheng had a strong yang energy, so he transformed into an ancient dragon. My divine power has increased by over 20,000. Li Cheng rejoiced. He hadn't expected such a significant enhancement, and his injuries had also improved. It was a pleasant surprise. After his transformation, he looked at the two younger members of his family and nodded, indicating that they could also transform. Jian Wushuang was relatively satisfied with the pills he had refined for himself. As for Jinchen's issue, he hadn't considered it. Reversing the human tribe's transformation again would be quite troublesome. Moreover, to refine pills for transforming back into humans, materials from strong members of the human tribe would be required. After a moment's pause, he answered, "There will be a solution once we're out. If not, I'll reverse the transformation again and refine transformation pills for you to become human. But by then, you'll have to ask Her Majesty to find the materials for me." Reversing the pill formula, even just for experimentation, required a considerable amount of materials, likely needing many universe masters. Luckily, Jinchen was an emperor. However, even as an emperor, she still needed to kill many powerful human emperors. Killing wild beasts was manageable. They were naturally opposed. Killing them didn't incur any karma. But slaughtering the weak would generate karma. Initially, he didn't care about karma because of his karmic tribulation. Besides, he was already ill, so one more affliction didn't matter. Now that the karmic tribulation was over, he didn't want to engage in such actions anymore. When he wiped out the Qin family, it was because the family itself had significant karma, which led to their demise. Not only did he escape the binding of karma, but he also gained the protection of moral righteousness. Exterminate evil. It had its benefits, and it was a long-term investment. Committing evil. It only brought temporary gains, not lasting, unless one could redeem themselves halfway. Of course, to Jian Wushuang, regardless of which path one took, it was all for self-interest. No one cared about ants. That was the essence. Jinchen didn't understand the intricacies. She believed that even if he could transform into a human, there was no need for hesitation. The transformation began. Eventually, all four of them completed the transformation. Li Cheng became an ancient dragon. Jinchen turned into a mermaid. The other two members of the Li family transformed into a pair of yakshas. Jian Wushuang was quite satisfied. With a swift change in form, he transformed using his origin source into a masked black-armored demonic cultivator. Much like the great Xia from Qishan Temple. Just like before in Qishan Temple. Although his appearance still resembled that of a human, his actions and the aura emanating from him had nothing to do with humanity. Seeing Jian Wushuang's transformation, it was as if he had become a different person. The others were somewhat curious, but they didn't dare to ask too much. "All right, let's go now. Leave this place." Jian Wushuang took the lead and jumped into the water pool, with the others following suit. He led the way, with Li Cheng bringing up the rear. The two universe masters from the Li family protected Jinchen on both sides. They traveled through the chaotic rocks, swaggering through the riverbed. Li Cheng, who was at the back, looked around and asked, "Friend Wushuang, do you have a plan? Where will our next stop be?" Speaking of their destination, even Jian Wushuang himself didn't know. He was following the route to find Wu Li based on causality. But he couldn't tell these people. "I haven't decided yet, but there are many wild beasts in the riverbed. They should also be divided into tribes and forces. Since we have transformed into demons, Let's go meet those demonic forces. We might even get some unexpected gains. Jian Wushuang was still somewhat hopeful. Unlike these people who were scared silly, thinking only of saving their lives, there were so many opportunities in the sacred assembly. He still had some distance to go before achieving universal perfection. Looking at the pieces on the chessboard, he could devour all that he could. He didn't have the strength to devour the rest. He could only search for origin source treasures. This place was a good spot. The origin source of wild beasts was very fragile, and there were probably many origin source treasures in the riverbed. He could take this opportunity to search for some. Upon hearing this, Li Cheng sighed inwardly, feeling that he was getting old. The younger generation of strong cultivators still thought about opportunities even in desperate situations, while he only wanted to save his life. The strength was displayed just like that. The landscape gradually shrank. After leaving the chaotic stone pile, the group traveled for about a day. They finally left the area of the Watergrass River. At this point, they arrived at a huge trench at the bottom of the river. This trench was like a mountain range on the ground. Without hesitation, Jian Wushuang plunged in. Along the way, they encountered many savage beasts. However, when those savage beasts saw them, they kept their distance. Even savage beasts at the fourth tribulation realm dared not approach. This was related to the aura emanating from him. Among their group, Li Shang had the highest realm, the universe master at the fourth tribulation. But now, he was using the origin source of the beast god, so he appeared to be at the tribulation realm. Moreover, although the origin source within the beast god weapon had not reached its peak, it had also reached the peak of the fourth tribulation. When those savage beasts saw him, they thought he was a descendant of the beast god and at the peak of the fourth tribulation. So they didn't keep their distance. Descendants of the beast god were noble beings wherever they went. Jian Wushuang only exerted twice the power of the beast god, and he could maintain this state all the time. Plus the origin source of the beast god. He was indeed a descendant of the beast god. However, the fact that these savage beasts dared not approach him was also a problem. He couldn't find an entry point. Can't just wander around randomly. The guidance of karma was somewhat vague after all. Wu Li was most likely in this deep ravine. It's also unclear how the other party managed to escape initially. For now, the only option is to go in first and then figure things out. Within the vast mountain range at the bottom of the river, there were countless savage beasts. There were also many treasures. Some treasures, which those savage beasts didn't care for, were quite useful for Jian Wushuang. Along the way, he picked up many treasures that enhanced his origin source. The origin source contained within them was extremely rich. Even outside, they would be considered good treasures. Li Shang was somewhat amazed to see his approach. Although his strength was comparable to the peak of the fourth tribulation, he was picking up trash that Li Shang wouldn't even glance at. For powerful cultivators who cultivate divine power, those treasures that enhance origin source might be considered treasures if they are particularly special. But the ones Jian Wushuang picked up wouldn't even catch the eye of someone at the third tribulation. Jian Wushuang didn't care about others' gazes, walking and stopping from time to time, picking up many treasures that enhanced his origin source, enough to condense a black hole. Since he could pick them up easily, why not? He was getting closer and closer to the completion of the universe. Once the universe was complete, he would only need to condense the real universe. Before condensing the universe, he still needed to break through the tribulation realm. He needed to sense where his own tribulation was. This requires a considerable amount of external force and his own comprehension. Something that can't be forced. He needs to comprehend it amidst crisis. Right now, a crisis is indeed approaching. In the outskirts of the mountain range, within a narrow crevice, a great battle was unfolding. Leading each side were formidable experts at the fourth tribulation, accompanied by over 100 beasts of the third tribulation. Within the cramped confines of the crevice, the earth shook with their clashes. Jian Wushuang and his companions watched nearby. Let's move on. These beasts seemed to be fighting over some treasure. Li Shang's eyes were sharp, discerning a faint halo beneath the crevice along with a distinct aura of power. It must be a valuable treasure. Others might not have noticed it, but Jian Wushuang paid only slight attention to the treasure below the crevice. It seemed to be an artifact for enhancing divine power, undoubtedly valuable to the beasts. But to him it was mere rubbish. What he cared about was the conflict itself. The two opposing experts, both in human form and not yet unleashing their true power, seemed far from engaging in a fight to the death. It was different for the solitary beasts. It was highly probable that the battling experts represented two different factions. If he were to intervene now, Jian Wushuang could blend into one of the beast factions, making it easier to search for Wu Li in the future. Now he had to consider how to utilize this conflict to gain the trust of the other party. Firstly, his background. The ancient river was extremely wide, traversing the entire periphery. Its source led straight to the core of the inner circle. The forces there must be complex and intertwined. Concealing his identity wasn't a problem. He could easily fabricate a false one. With the primordial beast origin source they all possessed, the other side wouldn't suspect them of being human. After much thought, Jian Wushuang took notice. Turning to look at Li Shang and the others, he calmly asked, "Are you all ready?" Li Shang hesitated upon hearing this. Just as he was about to speak, something dawned on him, and he quickly pulled Jinshin and the others back. "Are you out of your mind?" He thought Jian Wushuang had gone mad, rushing to snatch treasures from those primordial beasts. It wasn't entirely his fault for jumping to conclusions. Jian Wushuang had already released his aura. "Ha!" Jian Wushuang shouted, his divine power surging directly to 550,000. With a flash, he darted into the crevice of the mountains. The sudden burst not only startled Li Shang and the others but also froze the primordial beasts still engaged in combat. Faced with the sudden appearance of this mysterious powerhouse, they all halted their actions. Jian Wushuang was enveloped in a crimson aura, the power of the beast god, the purest innate power of the beast god. This aura suppressed all the primordial beasts. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he scanned the primordial beasts with a glance. Since none of them had unleashed their true forms, they all appeared humanoid, albeit with wildly diverse appearances, resembling humans only in form. The leading figures on both sides were peak-level experts of the Fourth Tribulation, with divine power exceeding 500,000. Similar to the Tanlang back then. However, the Celestial Wolf tribe did not belong to the category of savage beasts. They all claimed to be descendants of noble beast gods. Jian Wushuang was the same now. Erupting with a divine power of 550,000, he directly suppressed the two of them. At the same time, he also noticed that both of the Fourth Tribulation peak experts had a badge hanging on their chests. The shapes of the badges were different. It seemed to be a distinction between two forces. One of the Fourth Tribulation's experts, with a fish head and human body, frowned when he saw Jian Wushuang suddenly appear. He could tell that Jian Wushuang's aura was very special. His strength was even stronger than his own, and he was not someone to be trifled with. "Allow me to interrupt your enjoyment. The treasure below this place is very important to me. I didn't travel thousands of miles just for this treasure. Please give me some face." Jian Wushuang clasped his fists towards the leaders of both sides. This surprised the leading experts on both sides. However, they were all wary of this suddenly emerging powerful figure. Both sides were forces of savage beasts in the mountains. Although they were in a hostile relationship, they knew each other at least. Suddenly seeing a stranger at the Fourth Tribulations, they couldn't help but feel suspicious. And as soon as he arrived, he directly named the treasure below. That was going too far. After fighting for so long, they couldn't just hand it over. Even if they sensed that Jian Wushuang's aura was extraordinary, he might be a descendant of a beast god with extremely strong power, they wouldn't let him off easily. Moreover, Jian Wushuang had already made it clear that he was not a local expert. There was even less need to worry. With so many of them, they wouldn't let an outsider snatch it away. Jian Wushuang's eyes shifted, and he was also clear about this. He wanted it just like this. First, getting both sides to stand on the same line, solidifying the impression of his identity as a formidable outsider would be enough. Next, it was about undermining these people from within. "Are you out of your mind, sir?" You say jump and we're supposed to ask how high? Who do you think we are? Scoffed the fourth tribulation powerhouse with a fish-like head and humanoid body, displaying extreme disdain. He didn't care where this mysterious outsider in front of him came from, nor did he care how formidable their background might be. This place was their territory. Obtaining treasures wouldn't be so easy. Upon hearing this, Jian Wushuang didn't get angry. Instead, a hint of joy welled up in his heart. Haha, my apologies for the abruptness. He calmly retrieved 10,000 primordial stones from his mustard seed pouch and said nonchalantly, "These are treasures I obtained a few days ago by slaying a human powerhouse. I heard they were bred from the source universe of human powerhouses. I'm willing to exchange these for the treasures you have below. Primordial stones." He still had millions of primordial stones on him. These were essential for both human powerhouses and these savage beasts, as well as other special beings. The infinite great world not only amplified divine power, but also restored one's origin source. For these people and beasts of the wilderness, it was also a rare treasure. In the past, there had been strong individuals who ventured into the infinite great world, but never as many as after the opening of the sacred assembly. Moreover, those were ancient events. Local strongmen who could produce primordial stones in this place were few and far between. Perhaps some of them had already been used up. Even the fourth tribulation powerhouse with a fish head and human body had only heard rumors about primordial stones. This was their first encounter with one. Feeling the unique aura emanating from the primordial stone, their minds trembled. He had heard that these primordial stones, needed by the universe master of the human race, took a long time to form. The other party offered 10,000 pieces in one go, which was definitely a generous offer. He was about to agree immediately, but before he could speak, Jian Wushuang spoke up. "Since you both saw it first, then split this 10,000 primordial stones between yourselves." With these words, the fourth tribulation powerhouse with a fish head and human body furrowed his brow and turned to look at the serpent-headed powerhouse who had previously contested with him for the treasure of this place. For them, the primordial stones were even more important than the treasures below. How could they possibly agree to split them? For the treasures below, they were willing to fight each other to the death. Not to mention these primordial stones. But neither of them were fools. What if they ended up both injured in a fight and then got ambushed by mysterious individuals? For a moment, both sides were deadlocked once again. Jian Wushuang remained unchanged in expression, just as he had imagined. "Since neither of you have any objections, I'll just take this treasure." With those words, he waved his hand, unleashing a burst of powerful divine force that directly sucked the treasure, emitting a dazzling light from the crevice into his hand. After carefully weighing it and delving into its origin source with his thought power, he discovered it was a kind of inner core left behind by a desolate beast of the plant and wood variety after its demise. Essentially, it was a small sphere formed by the condensation and contraction of its origin source after falling. Internally, however, it contained a complete universe origin source, and it was a universe origin source of 4 or more tribulations. Its value was not insignificant. This was a universe origin source with roots, unlike the original origin source of all things. The origin source of all things was condensed by the Lord of all things and was rootless water. But within this inner core lay the purest origin source of the desolate beast. Although it didn't offer much assistance to his starry sky origin source, he didn't disdain it. Yet, it held great utility for the origin within his beast god weapon. It could completely elevate the origin within the beast god weapon by a notch. 10,000 primordial stones wasn't a bad deal. After collecting the treasure, Jian Wushuang turned around to leave. However, the fish-headed beast and the snake-headed beast simultaneously blocked his way. Jian Wushuang frowned and spoke, "Gentlemen, isn't this a bit uncalled for?" "Dao friend, you've misunderstood." The fish-headed man smiled obsequiously. The snake-headed strongman also revealed a kind smile, attempting to get closer. But Jian Wushuang kept retreating, looking wary as he said, "And why is that?" "Well, you see, Dao friend, do you still have those primordial stones on you? I'm willing to pay a high price for them." The fish-headed strong man eagerly offered. The strong with the snake head, unwilling to be outdone, quickly said, "I am willing to double the price." The two of them thus began to argue again. Jian Wushuang, seeing this, hurriedly stepped forward to mediate, saying, "Gentlemen, indeed, I still have some primordial stones on me, but the treasures I need require delving deeper into these mountains. I'm afraid. Don't worry, although I can't produce it, but my king at home can definitely bring it out." The strong with the fish head knew what Jian Wushuang wanted to say, obviously thinking that the two of them were not worthy and couldn't produce such treasures. But their king definitely had the treasure Jian Wushuang needed. And there were many more. The mountains here stretched to the inner circle of the infinite great world, countless strong beings. But when it comes to who is the strongest, that is definitely their king. The treasures are the same. Upon hearing the word king, the strong with the snake head fell silent. The force he belonged to was established by a special life form at the fifth tribulation, and its heritage couldn't be compared to the king mentioned by the strong with the fish head, because that king was a genuine sixth tribulation's realm strong being. "Sly snake, stop arguing with me. You can't beat me. I'm willing to split these 10,000 primordial stones with you. It's also because I have some respect for you. Don't make trouble for yourself." The sudden toughness of the strong with the fish head surprised Jian Wushuang. The strong with the snake head snorted coldly, casually taking half of the primordial stones into his hand, and snorted, "Cababan, don't get cocky. We'll have plenty of time to settle this in the future." Leaving behind a harsh remark, he hurriedly left with his men. But the fish-headed Cababan was very pleased, saying, "Sly snake, you're somewhat sensible. Among the forces in this mountain range, no one can compete with the force behind our king." "Oh," Jian Wushuang asked with a surprised expression, "I wonder, who is the king you speak of, my friend? Is it one of the sacred lords among the savage beasts?" Among the super-strong beasts, especially the self-proclaimed sacred lords, it was somewhat of a jargon. Upon hearing this, Cababan hurriedly waved his hand, saying, "No, no, my lord. He despises those mundane titles. You can address him as the King of Rivers." "The King of Rivers?" Jian Wushuang deliberately widened his eyes. When he collected materials from savage beasts, he had once probed the souls of some third tribulation realm savage beasts. In the memories of those savage beasts, there was the title of the King of Rivers. However, he didn't know the exact identity of the other party. Perhaps those savage beasts had only heard of it. "Yes, the king of this Roman river." Cababan was proud of this. Then he especially carefully said to Jian Wushuang, "Also, my lord, our king is the only sixth tribulation realm powerhouse in the entire Roman river, having crossed the divine tribulation 6 times. Goodness! This time Jian Wushuang was truly shocked. He hadn't expected that there would be a sixth tribulation realm powerhouse in this ancient river. Now he was somewhat regretful. Originally, he took out the primordial stones just to attract the other party's attention, and then infiltrate their ranks. This way, he could openly go deep into the mountains. Now knowing that there was an old monster of the sixth tribulation realm inside, he was somewhat afraid. But you don't need to be afraid. Our king is the most merciful. As long as you have primordial stones, the king can exchange treasures with you. He will never bully the weak with his strength. If you don't believe it, you can inquire around," Cababan assured, patting his chest. Although savage beasts were not inferior to humans in intelligence, their bold nature was much stronger than that of humans. Jian Wushuang could only choose to believe now. "Then I will trouble the king's cave," Jian Wushuang said politely. "No problem," Cababan replied. After confirming, Jian Wushuang turned to greet Li Shang, who was hiding in the distance, signaling them to come over. Li Shang, from afar, saw everything. He knew what Jian Wushuang was going to do. Originally, he thought this plan was okay. But when he heard about the sixth tribulation realm, he regretted it. They had just escaped from the clutches of a fifth tribulation realm dragon, and now they were going into the lion's den. The former situation was manageable. Once the Empress returned, she could handle that unruly dragon. However, A sixth tribulation realm savage beast, even with the Empress's return, wouldn't yield an inch of advantage. That was sealing one's own fate. Now, following Jian Wushuang was the only option, albeit reluctantly. They came along unwillingly. Jian Wushuang beckoned and smiled. "Brother Cababan, these are my subordinates. Their strength is decent, right?" "Not bad," Cababan replied, showing a smile to everyone and warmly greeted them. Jian Wushuang rubbed his hands. "Shall we set off then?" "No problem." Cababan dispersed his subordinates, leaving only a few peak third tribulation realm savage beasts to accompany them. With Jian Wushuang's group, they flew towards the depths of the mountain range. On the way, Jian Wushuang was told about many treasures and dangers within the mountains. At the same time, they discussed the forces within this riverbed mountain range. There were 3 major forces in total. One was the Azure Water Serpent Mansion. It was the force where Sly Snake from earlier belonged. The master of the mansion was a peak 5th tribulation realm powerhouse. Conflict between the 2 factions was frequent. However, they dared not escalate things. After all, a 6th tribulation realm force, if truly engaged in battle, would have no rivals. Apart from the Azure Water Serpent Mansion, there was another force also established by a 5th tribulation realm powerhouse, but it was not in the southern mountain range. Rather, it was near the northern waters close of the infinite great world. They generally didn't interact, so there wasn't much introduction about them. The story mainly revolves around the forces established by the River King. Weilong Mountain, a superpower constructed by beings of a special life form at the level of the 6th tribulation realm. Originally, Jian Wushuang thought that this River King was a savage beast, but he didn't expect it to be a special life form. That made its combat power even more formidable. Its divine power was probably close to breaking the 1,000,000 mark. Standing behind him, Li Sheng felt a chill run down his spine. 1,000,000 divine power was suffocating for them. The River King, also known as Tianmu King, had a giant 9-eyed sky toad as its true form. But Jian Wushuang couldn't help but sneer inwardly. Just a big toad, isn't it? As a 6th tribulation realm powerhouse, he had seen much more. There was no need to fear. He comforted himself inwardly. Indeed, he had seen a lot. He had encountered universe masters of the 6th tribulation and even had close encounters with super beings at the half-step 9th tribulation realm. Facing those kinds of powerhouses was the real suffocating experience. On the other hand, the so-called God, Weiss, he didn't feel any oppression from the opponent. It was just a tense feeling during the battle. Among the strong individuals he encountered through Babidi, the weakest were at the 7th tribulation realm. Not only did it broaden his horizons, but it also maximized his ability to withstand pressure. Weilong Mountain. Let's go and challenge this Weilong Mountain. Besides Tianmu King, there were also 3 Law Kings in Weilong Mountain. They were all top-level experts at the level of the 5th tribulation realm. Among the ranks of the 4th tribulation realm, there were many strong individuals numbering up to 100. However, only 8 of them could become guardians. Cababan was one of them, ranking as the 8th. His strength peaked at the 4th tribulation realm. Even in his current contracted form, he possessed the power of 500,000 divine power. If he were to fully unleash his true form, he could reach up to 550,000 divine power. Such strength placed him among the top-tier warriors, even among the 4th tribulation realm masters of the human race. Jian Wushuang, in his current state, possessed a divine power of 550,000, not to mention his status as a descendant of the beast god. Others speculated that if he were to unleash his true form, he might possess 600,000 divine power. The reason why savage beasts usually maintained a humanoid form was not just to mimic the human race, but also because they found that condensing their divine bodies could conserve divine power. Maintaining their true forms consumed too much energy. It was more efficient to condense their divine bodies into the smallest humanoid form possible, saving a considerable amount of divine power. Savage beasts might seem carefree on the surface, but their internal conflicts were no less intense than those of the human race. With every blink of their eyes, they were ready to fight for opportunities. It was almost a skirmish every 3 days and a major battle every 10 days. However, despite their seemingly aggressive nature, they were quite conservative in actual combat. In the recent skirmish, for instance, none of them resorted to unleashing their true forms. They knew when to draw the line. This observation surprised Jian Wushuang. Throughout their conversation, he had developed a fondness for Cababan. Despite belonging to different races, they shared a mutual respect, which left Jian Wushuang impressed. Here we are. Cababan's pace slowed as he came to a halt. Before them loomed a majestic mountain peak. In this mountain range, it definitely ranked in the top 3. From its summit, one could overlook all the other mountains. Weilong Mountain, Jian Wushuang muttered to himself, then turned to ask, Cababan, does Weilong Mountain really have dragons? Cababan chuckled upon hearing the question. Brother, you've guessed right. Weilong Mountain indeed has dragons, but they're not real dragons. The divine bodies of real dragons are comparable to those of beast gods. It's extremely difficult to reach the tribulation realm. There isn't a single true dragon in the entire Roman River. In that case, what about Weilong Mountain? Jian Wushuang pointed to the peak. Only then did Cababan explain. While there are no true dragons, there are still dragon-like creatures known as scaled dragon. Weilong Mountain was once inhabited by a black scaled dragon. After it was defeated by our king and submitted under his rule, the king found the name quite imposing and decided to keep it. A black scaled dragon? Jian Wushuang furrowed his brow, thinking to himself, what a small world. Li Shang's expression also darkened. They had been relentlessly pursued by a Jiaolong, forced to transform into savage beasts. Could the black-scaled dragon of Weilong Mountain be the same one they encountered? If so, it would just go to show how unpredictable life can be. Most likely, the powerful spectators outside would marvel at their experiences. Fortunately, they had all transformed their essences, so even if they encountered it, it wouldn't matter much. Cababan led them to the foot of the mountain. Upon seeing Cababan, the savage beast guarding the mountain gate showed utmost respect. The Lord Guardian has returned. Has anything significant happened on the mountain recently? Cababan casually inquired. The gatekeeper beast shook his head, replying, thanks to the efforts of the Guardian Lord expanding our territory, the mountain gate remains safe. Here's your reward. Cababan casually tossed out some treasures, giving them to the 2 gatekeeper beasts. They were overjoyed. Seeing unfamiliar faces, though they didn't recognize them, they felt the overwhelming divine power, even stronger than Cababan's, and quickly saluted respectfully. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang signaled to Li Shang. Li Shang had no choice but to follow suit, taking out some treasures from his mustard seed bag and tossing them to the 2 beasts. Forget about them. Let's go in. Cababan appreciated Jian Wushuang's approach. However, Li Shang felt it unnecessary. Since rewards were given, why not give them personally rather than making him pay for it? The impression of Jian Wushuang being stingy was etched into his mind. From the moment they entered the mountains, he had been constantly picking up scraps. And now he was being miserly. Jian Wushuang didn't care about others' opinions of him. All he knew was that this time, he had exerted a lot of effort to protect these few people. If they had to give up some treasures, so be it. Following Cababan, they ascended Weilong Mountain. In the forecourt, Cababan had already relayed the message to TMU King, and now the king awaited Jian Wushuang in the main hall. By the way, I haven't asked my brother's name yet, so I can report to the king later. Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate, answering directly, I am Hu Biao, from the south bank of the Roman River. Cababan chuckled, Brother Hu, please wait a moment. I'll go in and report to the king. With that, he entered the main hall, leaving Jian Wushuang and his companions outside. Turning to the solemn-faced Li Shang, Jian Wushuang conveyed through a message. Just use your own names. Say you're my subordinates. Nothing more. I've already transmitted the basic information about the South Bank to your tokens. Take a quick look. Although their auras were all those of savage beasts, for safety's sake, they still needed to brush up on their knowledge of the infinite great world and the discourse commonly used among savage beasts. Otherwise, they might arouse suspicion. Upon hearing this, Li Shang and the others quickly checked their tokens. Jian Wushuang glanced at Jinshin. She was only an emperor, but her beauty was unparalleled. Even though she had turned into a mermaid, her face remained that of a normal human, unchanged from before, except for her feet, which had become fish tails. "Take this." Jian Wushuang handed her a mask. Jinshin, puzzled, asked, "What's this for?" "Don't think. Just put it on." Jian Wushuang sensed Cababan's approach and hurriedly urged her. Without further hesitation, Jinshin quickly put on the mask. Swish! Though the contours of her face remained unchanged, there was now a black fish scale on her left cheek. She couldn't believe it as she touched her face, feeling a sense of despair creeping in. First, she had turned into a wild beast, and now there was a fish scale on her face. She was on the brink of collapse. The sacred assembly, or rather, it felt like a purgatory. The weak struggled while the strong vied for dominance. Suddenly, she felt a strong desire to go back. Back to Yu Kingdom. She wanted to go to the daughter kingdom even more. No wonder Queen Yunji had advised her against attending the sacred assembly. Everything had its reasons. Her mother's sudden departure, the fall of the elders. The blows to her were too much. Jian Wushuang glanced over, though it pained him somewhat. He had no other choice. The reason why the Empress was probably because the trials she endured were far more terrifying than now. At least now Jian Wushuang was there to protect Jinshin. She hoped the other party could make it through. If one lacked a firm will and only sought a life of wealth and luxury, it would be better to seek refuge with Queen Yunji. Following Empress Fengqian, even her own daughter wouldn't have an easy time. The Empress would only become stricter towards Jian Wushuang. The greater the expectations, the greater the disappointment. The Empress's expectation was that after she became a holy maiden, Jinshin would be able to take her place. As long as Jinshin broke through to the Tribulation realm, rapidly reached the third tribulation, then mastered the universe, inherited the throne, she would also have that qualification. And with the Empress's blessing, securing the throne would not be difficult. This was the Empress's expectation for Jinshin. If the Empress saw Jinshin's current state, she might be disappointed. Perhaps Jian Wushuang was also taken into account. Jian Wushuang felt that he could also help Jinshin. But Jian Wushuang was not someone to be underestimated. Staying in Yu Kingdom for long was impossible. After this sacred meeting, he would probably leave. Jinshin had to face everything alone. Ah! Jian Wushuang concealed his sigh and turned his head towards the hall. The heart of a strong one must be resolute. They must face the path that the strong must walk. Greenhouses have flowers, but no thorns. "Please, Hu Biao!" A loud voice sounded in the hall, and Babidi also stepped forward, making a gesture of invitation. Jian Wushuang nodded and turned to Li Shang behind him, saying, "You wait here, I'll go in alone." It was an invitation to him. Bringing more people wouldn't be appropriate. This was a courtesy visit, not just a casual call. Stepping forward, as he entered the hall, he felt a sense of oppression. He retracted his telekinetic force, refraining from probing, as it would be impolite. He could only glance around with his eyes before taking another step forward. At a rough estimate, there were hundreds of powerful individuals in this hall. Even the weakest emitted the aura of the third tribulation, and the aura of those at the fourth tribulation was considerable. And there were also two mighty individuals at the fifth tribulation, seated on high thrones on both sides. In the central position, there was the king of the river of Roman, Tianmu. Walking to the center of the hall, Jian Wushuang bowed and performed the highest courtesy among savage beasts. "Kid, on the south bank of the Roman River, Hu Biao from Wanda Mountain pays respects to the great king." As soon as his words fell, a peak powerhouse at the fourth tribulation next to him spoke up. "Mount Wanda? Never heard of it. Such a nameless mountain. How dare it compare to the Weilong Mountain?" Jian Wushuang lifted his head, facing the inquirer directly, his tone resolute this time. There was no hint of reverence towards the strong. In this world of savage beasts, strength was the only currency. For the powerful, one should show respect. For equals in strength, regardless of status, they were treated as such. So are you here at the Roman River to pay respects to the mountain or to seek companionship? Another voice came from Jian Wushuang's right. Turning to look, there stood a colossal lava beast, its head adorned with fragments of rocks, towering to hundreds of feet in height. Not a savage beast, but a special being, with a divine power slightly stronger than his own. I'm here to pay respects to the mountain, not to seek companionship. Jian Wushuang replied succinctly. Clack. On the highest throne in the upper left corner, there was the sound of knocking, and the Law King of the Fifth Tribulation spoke up. I've heard you possess primordial stones, obtained by killing a passerby. Whose sacred possessions did you rob? Getting straight to the point, the Law King's words eased Jian Wushuang's tension. It was indeed because of the primordial stones that he had the chance to pay respects to the mountain. But his real purpose was not to exchange the stones for treasures. It was to secure a foothold in the Weilong Mountain. From then on, he would have a guarantee. He had thought about it. He might have to stay in the Roman River for a while. Avoiding trouble wasn't an option, especially when he had to find Wu Li, and he was accompanied by some people. It wasn't convenient at all. He had no choice but to enter a major power first. It was a safer approach, using the primordial stones as a reason to enter the Weilong Mountain to exchange for treasures. Even if it meant bullying the weak with the strong, he would do it. The loss was negligible. His strength was enough, coupled with the power of the beast god. Those savage beasts still regarded him highly. Otherwise, they would have just robbed him without so much fuss. Jian Wushuang raised his head proudly and replied loudly, I robbed cultivators and killed outsiders. Finishing his words, he directly took out more than 60,000 primordial stones. They were scattered, deliberately making it seem like that was all he had. These savage beasts were knowledgeable about cultivators and knew the significance of the primordial stones. Jian Wushuang's visible combat strength could, at most, kill some cultivators at the Fourth Tribulation. The number of primordial stones he obtained was about this much. Any more would raise suspicion. Seeing the primordial stones, the eyes of many powerful savage beasts widened. Even the Law Kings on both sides stood up. Only TMU King remained unmoved. Everything was laid out. Now they just awaited the word from TMU King. Hee. You youngsters are quite straightforward, which fits my taste. TMU King rocked his hefty body and stood up. As he spoke, his bloodthirsty mouth gaped wide open. A few strands of flesh whiskers hung from the corners of his mouth. Speak up. What treasures do you want to exchange? With a wave of his large hand, the savage beasts that had surrounded them all sat down. Jian Wushuang's face lit up, and he said, Great King of the River, I want. He directly listed a long string of treasure names, expressing his great demands. And these treasures were all within this mountain range. Although the primordial stones were precious, there were only tens of thousands of them, clearly not enough for exchange. After hearing this, the King of the River burst into laughter. You're quite greedy. With so few primordial stones, yet you want so many treasures. Do you have the guts to make this deal? At this point, Cababan was also a bit flustered. At first, he thought Jian Wushuang was quite savvy. But now, speaking to the king in such an arrogant manner, it was like asking a lion for its paw. The other savage beasts also thought Jian Wushuang had gone mad. Don't they realize where they are? Such exorbitant demands. Aren't they afraid of consequences? Jian Wushuang squinted around, feeling quite nervous inside. After taking a deep breath, he continued, Indeed, these primordial stones are not enough for exchange, but I truly need those treasures. He appeared genuinely troubled. The King of the River, seeing this, understood Jian Wushuang's intentions after a slight pondering. A special life form at the Sixth Tribulation wouldn't be a fool. After briefly sorting out Jian Wushuang's background, he understood what he was seeking. This mountain range was almost entirely controlled by the Weilong Mountain, and the treasures Jian Wushuang needed were all within this mountain range. Since there weren't enough primordial stones for exchange, they could only join forces. But this sentence must be spoken by the King of the River himself. Jian Wushuang's intentions were crystal clear as he spoke. All he needed was a nod from the other party, and he could smoothly transition, making them allies. With his divine power of 550,000 and beast god bloodline, he only fell short compared to the savage beasts of the fifth tribulation realm within this mountain range. Entering the Weilong Mountain was indeed a qualification he possessed, but he lacked the proper credentials. However, the primordial stone served as a decent token. Upon understanding this, the River King couldn't help but feel disdainful. He had no use for these primordial stones. For a special life form of the sixth tribulation realm without its own constructed universe, why bother with these primordial stones when there were plenty of treasures to enhance divine power? It all boiled down to one's cultivation level. But for this junior Jian Wushuang, he had some expectations. Bold, powerful, strategic. He was indeed worth taking in. With just a glance, he conveyed his intentions to Cababan, who escorted Jian Wushuang up the mountain. Cababan's heart leaped with joy as he stepped forward. If brother who needs these treasures, and they happen to be in the vicinity of my Weilong Mountain, why not accompany us? Instead of enduring hardships along the way, you can settle in our Weilong Mountain, have a place to stay, and freely search for the treasures you need. What's there not to like? Jian Wushuang initially revealed a hint of joy, but then his expression turned serious as he spoke. I am weak in strength. I fear I may not catch the eye of the esteemed seniors. I think, what's there to ponder? With your strength, brother who, even if you join our Weilong Mountain, is enough to serve as a guardian. I suggest you follow behind me and become the 9th guardian of Weilong Mountain. How about that? Cababan interrupted, scanning the other savage beasts before continuing. Anyone dissatisfied can come out and spar with brother who, if you dare. Except for TMU King and a few Law Kings, the remaining 8 guardians were all peak 4th tribulations experts with divine power exceeding 500,000. Jian Wushuang's divine power reached 550,000, and he hadn't even revealed his true form yet. Naturally, these people were somewhat wary. Even the 4th tribulation savage beasts who weren't guardians mostly had divine power in the 400,000 range. Even if they revealed their true forms, it would be difficult for their divine power to soar to 500,000. For a moment, no one dared to step forward. Seeing no one speaking up, Cababan respectfully bowed towards TMU King, who was sitting at the head, and spoke. Great King, I, Cababan, would like to recommend brother Hu Biao. I hope the Great King will accept. Jian Wushuang also bowed, indicating his agreement. They had come here for this moment to join the Weilong Mountain and establish a foothold. Then they could proceed to search for Wu Li's whereabouts under the guise of seeking treasures. At the same time, they could also await the Empress. If the Empress returned, Jian Wushuang could leave without any loss. Even these primordial stones could be presented as a gift to TMU King. The atmosphere in the hall quieted down. TMU King swayed his bulky body, stroked his beard, and finally spoke. I declare that today, Weilong Mountain shall add another guardian. As his voice fell, Jian Wushuang breathed a sigh of relief. Even the savage beasts in the hall looked at him with kind eyes. Cababan, in particular, hugged Jian Wushuang's shoulder, excitedly exclaiming, Brother Hu, from now on, you're one of us. Finally, I have someone younger than me. I'll be the 8th, you'll be the 9th. From now on, you're old 9. Thank you, Brother Cababan, for the recommendation, Jian Wushuang said politely, then turned to TMU King with solemnity. Thank you, Your Majesty, for accepting me. TMU King waved his hand dismissively, saying, All right, by joining Weilong Mountain, you've added a great warrior to our ranks. I see the bloodline of a beast god in you. Work hard and step into the 5th tribulation realm soon. That was quite a high appraisal. Jian Wushuang seemed to have favorable impressions from everyone he encountered. Whether it was ruler Yunji, sword Immortal Tonghe, or any of the top divine craftsmen from the ancient Wood continent, they all had high hopes for him. Even a special life form held such expectations for him. Although they were of different races, Jian Wushuang still felt a warmth in his heart. During this period, he was just lodging temporarily, so it was best to avoid conflicts if possible. His joining caused a brief stir in Weilong Mountain. That evening, a grand feast was held. Fortunately, there were no humans around or he wouldn't have been able to enjoy it. After the festivities, Cababan personally found him a cave dwelling, providing some stability. Once the other party was seen off, Jian Wushuang finally breathed a sigh of relief. Though the cave dwelling was somewhat rudimentary in its furnishings, it contained a considerable amount of divine power. Just as he began to relax, Li Sheng hurriedly approached from outside the cave, saying, "My lord, someone has come to pay their respects." Jian Wushuang was momentarily surprised. He had just seen off Cababan, and he didn't know many people here. Who could be coming to pay their respects all of a sudden? After quickly tidying up his appearance, Jian Wushuang stepped out. Lady Du. Seeing the visitor, his expression remained unchanged, but his heart sank. During the joining banquet, he had heard someone mention this Lady Du. The second in command among the 8 guardians was exceptionally powerful, possessing a divine strength of 550,000 even in humanoid form. Skilled in the use of poison, she wielded methods as elusive as her nature. Even the Law King of Weilong Mountain treated her with utmost courtesy. Characters like Cababan couldn't distance themselves fast enough upon encountering this lady. Her name alone was enough to inspire fear. Meeting her in person naturally induced some panic. Though they had already met at the banquet, the crowd then had diluted any apprehension. Meeting privately now naturally stirred some nerves. Nevertheless, Jian Wushuang gritted his teeth and welcomed her into the cave. Lady Du, originally a 1,000-eyed viper, was heavily poisoned. In human form, she still retained her black snake-scaled armor, which wrapped around her graceful figure. Though not as striking as Jincheng in appearance, she exuded a chilling allure, not the icy elegance of an empress but a coldness that sent shivers down one's spine. How's little brother adjusting here? If there's anything uncomfortable, feel free to tell your sister. Lady Du entered the cave, casting a glance around, but her eyes were fixed on Jincheng in the corner, emitting a sinister aura. This gaze made Jincheng uneasy, forcing her to avoid eye contact. Jian Wushuang pondered the intentions behind her sudden concern. Such care from her was indeed puzzling. What game was she playing? He had no dealings with Lady Du, so her concern surely harbored ulterior motives. Motioning for Jincheng to prepare some tea and seating Lady Du, Jian Wushuang spoke. The king has treated me well, and Cababan has been kind. There's no need for the lady's concern. Jincheng swayed her fishtail and drifted over slowly, carefully placing the tea down. Just as she was about to leave, Lady Du grabbed her hand suddenly. The sudden move startled Jincheng. She tried to pull her hand away but found herself unable to move at all. Jian Wushuang's face darkened. He reached out and placed his hand on theirs, saying, "Madam, feel free to speak your mind." As soon as he spoke, a dark red beast god's power erupted from his palm, directly breaking Jincheng free from the restraint. Lady Du sighed regretfully. Such a beautiful jade-like hand. What a waste! She then lifted her gaze to Jincheng's face, shamelessly appraising her. Jian Wushuang finally understood. It seemed the other party wasn't here for him at all. He had initially thought it was his appearance that attracted them, but it turned out to be Jincheng. But Jincheng was merely an emperor. What could they see in her? Her appearance? Jian Wushuang swallowed hard, surprised by this newfound interest. If it were anyone else, he could make a decision, but Jincheng couldn't afford to have any trouble. Otherwise, it would be a grave offense. Lady Du made her intentions clear, directly saying, "Brother Hu Biao, your maid is quite good. How about letting her be with me? I have quite a few treasures you might need." Just as he suspected, and they indeed wanted to exchange for treasures. A maid of an emperor. In this world of survival of the fittest, an emperor not even considered an ant. With his current status, he had no reason to refuse. But he had no choice. Electric arcs flickered in his eyes. Jincheng was trembling with fear by his side. But Lady Du, sitting beside him, seemed to like what she saw more and more. Suddenly, she said, "This little maid is still a virgin, truly a fine specimen." Ha ha! Jian Wushuang lifted his teacup, downed it in one gulp, and laughed heartily along. Jinshan panicked, and so did the others, including Li Shang. Seeing Jian Wushuang now, they realized he had completely forgotten who he was, turning into a wild beast. Jian Wushuang held a teacup, his smile fading into a cold expression. Crack! The teacup shattered in his grip. His aura surged suddenly, the wings on his back spreading wide, his divine power instantly reaching 550,000. Lady Du, do you think I'm easy to bully? I just arrived at Weilong Mountain, and you're already trying to snatch my personal maid. Jian Wushuang's anger flared as he spoke, itching to strike immediately. Lady Du hadn't expected Jian Wushuang to be so furious. Wasn't it just a servant at the emperor level? With a flick of her hand, countless people rushed forward to serve as maids for him. Why be so fixated on one? Jian Wushuang's outburst immediately drew the attention of powerful beings outside the cave. Cababan, not far away, charged in directly. But upon seeing Lady Du, his previous confidence vanished in an instant. Then, he forced a smile and ingratiatingly said, "Hey! I was wondering why Ninth Brother's cave was so lively. Turns out, Second Sister is here." Appearing to enter with a flattering smile, he naturally positioned himself on Jian Wushuang's side. "Big-head fish, you better not meddle in today's affairs, or I'll use you to make fish head soup." Lady Du shouted angrily, black lines appearing on her cheeks, spreading across half her face. The snake spit out from her mouth was terrifying. Jian Wushuang was not one to tolerate such behavior. He roared in anger, his candle dragon wings wrapping around his body before violently unfurling once more. With his wings spread out again, he fully transformed into the candle dragon. A dragon roar shook the heavens and the earth. This was the true beast god. Raising his candle dragon arm slowly, Jian Wushuang spoke coldly. "Old witch, if you seek a battle today, I will accompany you to the end. If you dare not, then get out of here." The sky sight heavenly chessboard gradually rose within his starry sky origin source. The armor had unknowingly spread throughout his entire body. The power of the beast god surged once again. The threefold power of the beast god had now become fourfold. His divine power reached a staggering 600,000. Lady Du was also taken aback. She hadn't expected Jian Wushuang to be so powerful. If he revealed his true form and unleashed his strongest divine power, it would probably exceed 600,000. Lady Du knew her own strength. Even if she revealed her true form as a viper, she didn't think she would be Jian Wushuang's match. As for using poison, she could clearly see the special dark red armor on Jian Wushuang's body. In a real fight, she wouldn't stand a chance. But if she just left like this, where would she put her face? Cababan also realized this. He quickly intervened, saying, "Brother Hu, calm down. We are all allies here. Why make things so embarrassing?" Although he said so, he also had grievances against Lady Du. He knew Jian Wushuang was brought here by him, yet she still came to cause trouble. If she wanted to cause trouble, she could have chosen another day. Jian Wushuang had just joined, and she came to provoke him, which was unacceptable. Even if TMU King were here, Lady Du would still be in the wrong. Moreover, Jian Wushuang's current burst of divine power was much stronger than Lady Du's, reaching 600,000. Strength was the ultimate truth. Brother Ba, there's no need to say more. I can see that this old witch is here to cause trouble. She came up here just to snatch my maid. Isn't that humiliating me? Jian Wushuang's aura shook once again, his face grimacing. The eye of the candle dragon shone brightly. If he truly wanted to, he could severely injure his opponent in just 3 moves. Seeing that she couldn't gain any advantage, Lady Du snorted coldly and could only leave. But she couldn't swallow this anger. Just before leaving, she suddenly turned around and spat out venom. The direction she aimed for was where Jinshan was. A mere emperor couldn't withstand such venom. As long as a trace touched her, there would be no hope of survival. This time, Jian Wushuang was thoroughly enraged. Before, it was a deliberate rage. This time, he was truly furious. His wings flapped, and he instantly appeared in front of Jinshan. Lifting the arm of the candle dragon, he immediately blocked the venom. A beam of light shot out from the candle dragon's eye, completely neutralizing the venom. Old witch, if I don't make you leave this cave standing upright today, I, Hu Biao, will commit crimes. Jian Wushuang roared in anger, clenched his fist, lifted off the ground, and rushed out fiercely. Lady Du managed to hold her ground with some tricks, but in a direct confrontation with Jian Wushuang, she had no advantage at all. She could only try to hide. Jian Wushuang had never encountered an opposition in terms of speed. Just as Lady Du was about to dodge, he predicted her move and kicked her hard in the face, sending her out of the cave in a horizontal position. With her face hitting the ground, she slid for hundreds of miles before stopping. Jian Wushuang walked to the entrance of the cave, ready to continue his attack. Cababan intercepted them, incessantly advising, "Brother Hu, absolutely not. This woman has a connection with Sangmo, the Law King. We can't lay a hand on her." Only then did Li Shang and the others realize the situation and quickly stepped forward to persuade. Now that things had just settled down, it was better not to stir up trouble. Jian Wushuang really wanted to go after them and give them another beating. He might not be able to defeat others, but he sure as hell could defeat a snake. It just so happened that he was craving wine that was made with snake gallbladder. Standing at the entrance of the cave, after uttering a few harsh words, he finally calmed down. Lady Du took advantage of the situation to slip away. After returning to the cave mansion, Cababan followed in. "Brother Hu, you're really hiding your power well. With such divine power, you could definitely rank second among the guardians. Much stronger than that old woman." Jian Wushuang stabilized his divine power at 550,000 again. Hearing that he could only be second with this level of power, he was somewhat puzzled. Could it be that the Whale Shark Guardian's divine power exceeds 600,000? The Whale Shark Guardian ranked first among the guardians of Weilong Mountain. It was rumored that he was a strong figure from the same era as the TMU King. Although just a guardian, his status was supreme, and he rarely ventured out. His strength was exceptionally formidable. He was already able to contend with the fifth tribulation realm. Cababan lowered his voice and explained, "The Whale Shark Guardian's normal divine power is already at 630,000. Although I haven't seen his true form, according to many people's speculations, the Whale Shark Guardian's full power might reach 700,000. 700,000! Jian Wushuang's face trembled. Not only him, but even Li Shang and others standing beside him were all looking at each other. 700,000 divine power was already the divine power of a fifth tribulation expert. Even a fourth tribulation universe master in their own universe would find it difficult to erupt with such divine power. A wild beast actually possessed such formidable divine power. It definitely harbored some undisclosed secrets. He also made a mental note of this figure. "Brother Hu, sorry to interrupt, but this time you offended that woman. Be careful from now on. Behind her stands a mage, Sangmo, who used to be the dragon at Weilong Mountain. But he's not there now. I heard he went to the east coast to lay eggs and may not be back for a while. But you still need to be cautious." Jian Wushuang nodded in gratitude, noticing that Cababan clearly had something else to say but didn't interrupt. "I was actually planning to visit again after some time, but who would have thought that woman would suddenly provoke you, Brother Hu? So, I thought I'd take this opportunity to talk to you about something." Cababan paused for a moment, then continued. "There are 3 Law Kings at Weilong Mountain, apart from Sangmo. You've seen the other 2 today. There are 9 guardians, except for the Whale Shark Guardian who doesn't care about external matters. Most of the other guardians follow the 3 Law Kings. You might not know about this." Jian Wushuang finally understood that the other party was drawing him into the discussion. Pretending to be confused, he said, "Apart from Sangmo, there are also Mafu and Xianxia. They are all Law Kings. I wonder, Brother Cababan, which Law King do you serve under?" "Brother Hu, I am currently under the command of Mafu King." Cababan continued, "This time, I also wanted you to join under King Fu. Rest assured, any treasures you need, as long as they appear, will all help you find them, and the amount to be handed over can also be reduced. so you can gather the necessary treasures faster. Jian Wushuang finally understood the benefits of joining such a small faction. Being in Weilong Mountain, if they collectively moved to seize treasures, the lion's share would have to be handed over. They could only keep a small portion for themselves. If they were to pledge allegiance to Mafu, they could avoid handing over as much in the future. It would also allow them to stick together. Where there were strong individuals, there would be conflicts. Even after entering Weilong Mountain, there were various smaller factions. To thrive, one had to pick sides early. By offending Lady Du this time, he essentially offended King Sangmo. He was left with only two choices. In his opinion, the strength of King Xianxia was the greatest, while Mafu King seemed somewhat weaker, perhaps comparable to Guardian Whale Shark. If he had to choose, he would definitely choose the stronger one. But he didn't know the other party. On the other hand, Mafu King had extended an olive branch to him first, and Cababan was also there to introduce him. It seemed to be the most suitable faction for him. After a moment's pause, he directly agreed. Cababan laughed heartily. Brother who is indeed straightforward. He liked Jian Wushuang's straightforward tone, without any beating around the bush. The simpler the matter, the better, and it saved him from wasting words. Anyway, he found Jian Wushuang more and more pleasing to the eye. Jian Wushuang smiled awkwardly and chatted with the other party for a while before Cababan bid farewell and left. After everything was settled, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. But there were still plenty of things to deal with in Weilong Mountain. Beasts were not like humans. They were cautious in the face of powerful forces. Even the solitary beasts in the mountains would fight back when faced with Weilong Mountain's beasts. There were battles almost every day. In the days that followed, he was constantly busy. Not only did he have to find Wu Li, but he also had to lead his people to seize territory. After a brief reorganization, everyone finally felt secure enough to retreat for a day. Each of them regained some energy. Jian Wushuang calculated the current manpower. Only Li Neng seemed reliable. The others had no hope, and he had to let Li Shang protect Jinqin. He might get his hands dirty. After 3 days of rest, Cababan came knocking again. Within the influence of Weilong Mountain, 2 unfamiliar Fourth Tribulation special life forms appeared, not only competing for treasures with Weilong Mountain's strong ones, but also killing many of them. Such matters could not be tolerated. The Mafu King immediately arranged for Cababan and Jian Wushuang to set out together to intercept the enemy. They each brought their own people along. Jian Wushuang was not at ease leaving Jinqin and the others at Weilong Mountain, so he took them with him. However, he hadn't yet recruited any powerful beasts under his command, which made his group seem somewhat lacking in diversity. Fortunately, Cababan had quite a few underlings. There were over a dozen beasts at the Fourth Tribulation level, each with a divine power of around 450,000, making them elites among the Fourth Tribulation level. Let's go! Jian Wushuang and Cababan, accompanied by hundreds of powerful beasts, headed straight for the area where the incident had occurred. As they departed, on a certain peak of Weilong Mountain, a blue-skinned beast with a grinning face emerged from a cave. Hu Biao. His eyes were extremely sharp. He was the first guardian of Weilong Mountain, the Whale Shark King. Although he was at the Fourth Tribulation level, he dared to call himself a king, indicating his formidable strength. He could hold his own against the Law King and even gain the upper hand when facing the weakest Mafu King. However, he never sought alliances and always practiced alone. Now, he found himself interested in Jian Wushuang. Standing outside his cave, another figure emerged from within, none other than the Law King, Mafu. Brother Whale Shark, this Hu Biao seems reliable to me. We can include him in our plan. Although Mafu King was a Fifth Tribulation level powerhouse, comparable in strength to the Whale Shark King, he was quite courteous to him. It seemed the two of them were plotting something together. Whale Shark King didn't turn around, his eyes deep in thought. After a long moment he spoke. Let's wait a bit longer. There's no rush for that matter. The cultivator who entered is quite weak. Even if he discovers our secret, it doesn't matter much. A mere human cultivator? Can he ruin our plans? Haha. My bad for being too cautious. Mafu King chuckled awkwardly, choosing not to speak further. Meanwhile, Jian Wushuang and his group, who had already set off, were quite fortunate. In a canyon within a mountain range, they stumbled upon the two unfamiliar special life forms at the fourth tribulation who had killed the powerful beings of Weilong Mountain. Moreover, they happened to block the enemy's path. TSK. Two ignorant beings dare to cause trouble at Weilong Mountain. Capture them all for me. Cababan gestured, and several experts at the fourth tribulations moved into action. They didn't give the other side a chance to speak. Less talk and more action. Speaking too much might not make the other side submit, but with enough fists you could make them yield. Or take their last breath. The opponents were just two ordinary beings at the fourth tribulation realm, not requiring Jian Wushuang to personally intervene. However, Jian Wushuang felt these two savage beasts were not so simple. Brother Ba! Be careful. Something feels off. Jian Wushuang surveyed the surroundings, feeling it was too quiet. Meanwhile, the two savage beasts on the other side remained calm, facing multiple enemies without panic. At this moment, Cababan also realized that, although he didn't sense any ambush by strong foes, there was something suspicious about this place. It was too quiet, and those two special life forms at the fourth tribulation showed no signs of panic, instead wearing smug expressions on their faces. Come back quickly. Jian Wushuang's face darkened, and he hastily shouted. Unfortunately, it was already too late. Fourth Tribulation Realm savage beasts had just approached the two special life forms when a huge net fell from the sky. Looking back, they saw 9 special life forms of the fourth tribulation had appeared, led by a silver-bodied special life form, unique in its flawless structure and terrifying divine power. The leader was exceptionally horrifying in strength, with the others possessing around 500,000 units of divine power each. They had been set up this time. Jian Wushuang sensed the danger and quickly transmitted a message to Li Shang, urging him to protect their own people. It's you. Cababan turned around, ignoring his subordinates trapped in the giant net, and focused on the silver-bodied special life form leading the group. The silver-bodied special life form had black rings around its eyes, and its mouth was filled with sharp teeth when it spoke. Fishhead, I told you I'd come back, and here I am. How's that for keeping my word? Cababan clenched his fist, his eyes twitching. He did indeed know the other party, and they were once close as brothers, bound by life and death. But alas, due to a disagreement they had taken different paths. Jian Wushuang also noticed the unusual relationship between the two and refrained from acting for the moment. However, he could tell that the other party meant harm. Now that you're back, that's good, Cababan said indifferently. The silver-bodied special life form waved his hand, pointing to his subordinates. What do you think of my men? They're quite formidable, aren't they? Not bad. They're all very powerful. Cababan understood the other's implication that he wanted to prove he had chosen the right path and was doing well. Ha. Good brother, it's been too long. The silver special life form walked forward alone. Cababan remained unmoved, his voice suddenly changing tone as he spoke. Master is already dead, and Master's wife is no longer here. You shouldn't have come back. It seems you still don't welcome me. The silver special life form stopped in his tracks. Jian Wushuang was a bit confused. He hadn't expected this to involve the grudges of 2 generations. Cababan chuckled bitterly at Jian Wushuang's confusion and said, Brother who? Excuse me, this is my senior brother, Pang Yun. Jian Wushuang just nodded without speaking. Since it was someone else's personal grudge, it was best not to get involved. Pang Yun gestured with his finger, beckoning a subordinate who brought out a box. Opening it casually, Pang Yun commanded, I didn't come back for anything else this time. I heard there's a treasure on Weilong Mountain. Please plant this death calculation grass there. It's that simple. Junior brother, you won't refuse, will you? Death calculation grass? Jian Wushuang had never heard of such a treasure before. He didn't pay much attention to it. But Cababan shook his head, his voice low. Senior brother, you can't threaten me anymore. I won't do anything for you. Pang Yun paused for a moment, then couldn't help but burst into laughter. Don't you think you're the guardian of Weilong Mountain and forget what you are? He pointed at Cababan. his laughter fading into seriousness. Then he said sternly, "Don't forget, you killed Master. You betrayed the sect. You'll never wash off the stain for the rest of your life." Upon hearing such explosive news, everyone was stunned. Jian Wushuang hadn't expected it either. Looking at the seemingly honest Cababan, he couldn't believe he had committed such treachery against his master and sect. Looks can be deceiving. The same goes for savage beasts. But he felt things weren't so simple, and he didn't jump to conclusions. He just waited for the situation to unfold. Betraying the master and the sect was a serious accusation. Once it spread, Weilong Mountain would probably expel Cababan. In the world of savage beasts, although chaotic, respect for teachers and principles was even stricter than among humans. Not respecting one's teacher would result in being looked down upon wherever one goes. If the incident with Cababan is true, then there's no point in staying here anymore. Everyone on Weilong Mountain is waiting for Cababan's explanation. Jian Wushuang adjusts his breathing, as if listening to a story. "It's not my fault that Master died." Cababan shakes his head, his aura surging, and his body starting to grow larger. He's about to transform into his true form. "Master!" Cababan's face twists with anger. Then he shouts, "Master's wife said that his death has nothing to do with me." Buzz! Cababan completely transforms into his true form, his divine power skyrocketing to 550,000. Swinging his huge head, he charges directly at his senior brother, Pang Yun. "You're the real culprit behind Master's death." Cababan's voice resounds like thunder. At this moment, Pang Yun waves his hand to signal his subordinates to step back. His figure also begins to rise, transforming into a towering divine being, blocking Cababan's massive fish head with one hand. With the other hand clenched into a fist, he fiercely strikes out. The burst of divine power clearly overwhelms Cababan. "You beast! Today I'll make the truth about our sect clear." Pang Yun seems to be holding the moral high ground. The battle between the two senior brothers is about to erupt. No one intervenes in the fight between Cababan and Pang Yun. But Jian Wushuang can see that Cababan is no match. Yet he can't act recklessly. He can only watch Pang Yun's subordinates standing still. It's called a fight, but in reality, it's just Cababan being beaten unilaterally. At this rate, Cababan will inevitably be killed. However, Jian Wushuang can't just stand by and watch Cababan die. Here's the translation. How is he going to report back like this? Pang Yun said that Cababan deceived his masters and annihilated his ancestors. Could it be true? There was no evidence whatsoever. It was utterly ridiculous. Once a crisis arose, Jian Wushuang would still intervene. The aerial combat was fiercely intense. Cababan's true form was a colossal philosopher salmon, tough-skinned and resilient against blows. Even after enduring a joss stick's worth of attacks, his divine power remained undiminished. Pang Yun was a special life form, the darling of all things, and his divine power was extremely resilient. Neither of them had any major issues. "Pang Yun, in today's battle, I will settle our life and death with you. I dare not forget what happened 100,000 epochs ago." Cababan's figure swayed, and his divine power unexpectedly increased again. Seeing this, Pang Yun wasn't surprised. He coldly said, "You finally show the skills our master taught you. Let me, your senior brother, see if you've improved over the years." Both of them erupted with divine power, reaching around 570,000. This time, Pang Yun was somewhat astonished. He hadn't expected Cababan's divine power to be on par with his own, making it difficult for him to accept for a moment. Nevertheless, he still had the upper hand. Even with equal divine power, his advantage as a special life form remained. Boom! They clashed once again, but this time they truly went all out. Their divine power had reached its peak, and each collision shook the earth and moved mountains. Jian Wushuang was also extremely surprised. He hadn't expected Cababan to conceal his true strength so well. Usually, he seemed like a kindly old man, but now he was displaying battle prowess that could rank in the top 5 among the Guardians. Perhaps those Guardians all had hidden cards that hadn't been revealed yet. Once they exerted their full power, each one would likely be extraordinary. This made Jian Wushuang feel awe. One must not be careless with these savage beasts. Boom! The two clashed again, and Pang Yun was sent flying hundreds of miles by the head of Cababan. His divine body began to crack. Pang Yun hadn't expected Cababan to actually injure him. He couldn't accept it. Cababan, who had always been beneath his feet, actually managed to harm him. "I'll kill you." Pang Yun formed hand seals, and a huge palm print directly covered the valley. Clearly, he was using his strongest secret technique. At this moment, Cababan turned to the crowd and said, "You guys, escape quickly. Run as far as you can. Don't mind me. If you can't hold on, send a message to me." Jian Wushuang called out to the others to retreat. However, Cababan was extremely confident and resolute, saying, "This time, I will definitely defeat him." With that, he rushed towards the huge palm print. Jian Wushuang led the crowd to watch the valley. Looking at the palm print descending from the sky, she felt somewhat worried. The power of that palm print had reached 600,000 divine power. That was the power of 600,000 divine power experts' casual strike. If he could exert 4 times the power of the beast god, he could easily break through it. With 4 times the power of the beast god, his divine power could also erupt to 600,000. But Cababan had already reached his limit, with only 570,000 divine power. It was somewhat unlikely for him to block it. If he died under this palm print, it would be very unworthy. "You guys wait here. I'll go take a look." Jian Wushuang's figure flashed, and she directly entered the gorge. Cababan noticed Jian Wushuang had returned but didn't say much. He knew Jian Wushuang's divine power was 600,000, so resisting this palm print shouldn't be a problem, and he could temporarily possess 600,000 divine power as well. "Ah!" Cababan roared angrily. "Ha!" His divine power soared directly to 600,000. A clear sky pillar broke through the palm print and rushed towards Pang Yun. "Impossible!" Pang Yun roared in frustration, but his figure gradually disintegrated into powder within the beam of light, while Cababan, having overexerted his divine power, transformed back into his human form and fell from the sky. Jian Wushuang, still reeling from the impact of their recent clash, reacted swiftly and caught Cababan as he fell. "You win!" Cababan's eyes welled with tears. "My master died because of me. My master's wife left because of me. My senior brother also because of me." Seeing the sorrow in his eyes, Jian Wushuang remained silent. It was Pang Yun's subordinates who dared to approach at this moment. "Brothers, this big fish has been severely injured. It's our perfect chance to avenge our sacred lord. Let's go!" they exclaimed. With just a glance, Jian Wushuang intimidated those who sought to take advantage of the situation, freezing them in place. "Get lost!" He had no intention of resorting to violence now. Otherwise, none of these special life forms would escape. Feeling the immense divine power emanating from Jian Wushuang, those special life forms were petrified. Their fighting spirit instantly crumbled, and they scattered in retreat. "Give them a way out." Cababan shook his head. Struggling to stand, he gazed at the ravaged valley with drooping eyelids. This battle not only exhausted all his strength but also shattered his state of mind. On the other hand, Jian Wushuang, this time around, did nothing. He simply watched the spectacle unfold. "Leave!" Cababan regained some of his strength and led the others back, despondent. Though they had emerged victorious, there was no joy to be found. Later, on the road, Jian Wushuang learned about the enmity between the two. 100,000 eras ago, Pang Yun's master had set out to find a treasure for his disciple as he aimed to break through the fourth tribulation. However, they were ambushed by vipers, and the master was fatally poisoned. As a result, Pang Yun missed his perfect breakthrough opportunity, and his strength plummeted drastically. Instead of reaching the fourth tribulation realm, he fell from the pinnacle of the third tribulation realm to a mere ordinary level of the third tribulation realm. In a fit of anger, he left the sect. During his absence, bumping and rushing, Cababan tried to remove the venom of the viper for his master. He had to rely on his own divine power to cleanse the toxins within his master's body. Everything seemed to be progressing in a positive direction. But one failed attempt to detoxify resulted in his master's illness worsening and eventually leading to his demise. And at this moment Pang Yun returned. He had reached the fourth tribulation and brought many treasures back to make amends to his master. But it was too late, his master was gone. The two Marshall brothers shifted blame onto each other, neither willing to bear the burden of responsibility for their master's death. Eventually, they engaged in a fierce fight. Naturally, he was no match and nearly lost his life to Pang Yun. Fortunately, their Marshall sister intervened and stopped Pang Yun. Cababan fled to the Roman River. However, unable to let go of his master's death, he made determined efforts and broke through to the fourth tribulation. Upon his return, he challenged Pang Yun again, only to suffer defeat once more. This time he completely lost his mind, believing that as long as he was inferior to his martial brother, it meant he was responsible for his master's death. He relentlessly pursued their martial sister, demanding her testimony. But then he discovered the affair between their martial sister and martial brother. Consumed by rage, he used this knowledge to blackmail their martial sister. In the end, she left. With no one left to testify for him, he gradually let go. Returning to the Roman River, he joined the Weilong Mountain. 30,000 years ago, he encountered his martial brother again, marking their final peaceful conversation. Pang Yun threatened him to steal treasures from Weilong Mountain. He did it. His senior brother left with the treasure. To avoid further threats, he began practicing forbidden techniques. That's why he could instantly boost his divine power. He had been waiting for this day, to prove himself, to rid himself of inner demons. After hearing the whole story, Jian Wushuang didn't pass judgment, only feeling that some things might be destined. There's no right or wrong. Their master's fate was just regrettable. Even when he returned to Weilong Mountain, Jian Wushuang was still reminiscing about the ancient beasts in the underwater world, the essence of all things. All things. Jian Wushuang's gaze was steady as he sat cross-legged on the mat in the cave, closing his eyes. In the origin source starry sky, all things rose. He also entered a state of cultivation. This incident also caused quite a stir on Weilong Mountain. There were congratulations for Cababan's triumph, but also jealousy trying to tarnish his success. But Cababan seemed indifferent, just like before. But every time he was inseparable from Jian Wushuang. The two of them went out together with their subordinates, patrolling or killing some foreign beasts, fighting for treasures. Time kept passing by. In the blink of an eye, 100 years had passed. These days in the underwater mountains were considered peaceful. There hadn't been any battles that posed a threat to life. Jian Wushuang continued his search for Wu Li without pause. But there had been no news whatsoever. This situation was driving him close to madness. And there was still no word from the Empress either. A century had passed, and even for missions as significant as those of the 5 stars, they should have been completed by now, unless they had met their demise within. The longer he waited, the more attached he grew to Weilong Mountain. However, even during these days, unrest simmered behind the mountain's facade. A force was slowly gathering within Weilong Mountain. The whale shark guardian began to appear more frequently during patrols and skirmishes. Many times he was seen alongside Jian Wushuang. The two became familiar with each other. To Jian Wushuang, the whale shark guardian seemed to be someone with deep scheming, but their interaction was relatively amicable. On this particular day, the 4 great guardians returned from their external expedition. Mafu King personally hosted a feast and invited the 4 great guardians to join him. Along with the whale shark, Cababan, and Jian Wushuang, there was another guardian, Junyan Guardian, who wasn't very familiar to Jian Wushuang. However, aside from Junyan, Jian Wushuang was acquainted with the other 2 guardians, so there was no reason to refuse. They all went together to Mafu King's cave to reminisce and relax. As they toasted and drank, the day passed quickly. They say beasts love wine, and this day proved it right. Jian Wushuang was also quite pleased. Despite not finding Wu Li and not receiving any word from the Empress, The time spent on Weilong Mountain had been the happiest since he arrived in the ancient moon spacetime. It seemed like within the Qixin Temple he had never felt this relaxed before. Looking back at Qixin Temple, it started with the brutal trials, crawling out of piles of dead bodies with Hu Qing. Witnessing Hu Qing's rise, receiving special care from Jinling, and gaining the pinnacle martial arts skill that everyone envied. Then, the time spent refining his body on Demon Sound Mountain with Shan Jun, although difficult, was comparatively happier. Everything started to feel more pressurizing after being taken away by Bai Junwang. Even though Bai Junwang didn't say anything to him, he didn't like the feeling of being led by fate. Later, Bai Junwang fell in the Three Kings' Court, which greatly struck him with loneliness and despair. Watching his former friends succeed in the Tao, while he could only stand in the distance like a lackey, offering silent blessings. Fortunately, he met teacher Xianxia again later, finding his own direction. It's not about one city or one place. Restoring his identity as an inheritor, causing chaos at Yuanyang Lake, and scheming against the divine beings with Wuxia. But damn it, in the end he still lost to the divine beings. Thinking back to the days in Qixin Temple, he had also grown a lot. No matter where he was, it seemed like he could find the right path. It's the same when he arrived in ancient moon spacetime, fighting for more powerful strength. They still needed him to guard the future of Qixin Temple. The secrets on teacher Xianyi's body were still waiting for him to uncover. Happiness always seems fleeting. He couldn't fall into his comfort zone. Weilong Mountain was quickly becoming his comfort zone now, especially seeing Li Shang flirting with a snake girl while holding a wine glass. Jian Wushuang's face turned dark. Perhaps in the first few years, everyone was too suppressed. Now, after a brief release, one by one, they all took over Weilong Mountain. This place is good, but they shouldn't forget why they came here. After 3 rounds of drinks, everyone leaned sideways on the soft animal skins, boasting about their achievements this time. The lean and short catfish spirit nodded and said, "Brothers, if it weren't for you guys holding me back, I could have torn that damn centipede apart. You're just bragging. I saw you getting tied up and beaten by the centipede." Kababan retorted at this moment, causing everyone to burst into laughter. Mafu King treated them all equally and didn't show off just because of his strength. On the contrary, the whale shark king always seemed troubled, with a face full of worry. Although Jian Wushuang kept chatting, he often observed the others, wanting to see what tricks they were up to. Following their lead, he said, pretending to be drunk, "Brother Whale Shark, we're all so happy today. Why do you still look so troubled? Is something bothering you?" Jian Wushuang deliberately pretended to be drunk and continued, "If there's anything, just say it. We're all brothers here. When you speak it out, it's no longer a problem. Sure, go ahead. Whatever it is, speak freely. We're all allies here today. If anything is bothering you, Brother Whale Shark, I can't promise anything, but near Weilong Mountain, there's hardly anything we can't handle." Mafu King adjusted himself and inquired, in the presence of Kababan and Whale Shark, "Drink." Whale Shark King didn't respond immediately. Instead, he raised his glass, disregarding everyone, took a gulp, wiped the wine from the corner of his mouth, and let out a hearty exclamation. After finishing his drink, his face immediately turned serious. He sighed, then glanced at everyone. Feeling that he had set the atmosphere just right, he finally spoke up. Jian Wushuang listened carefully, his eyes showing color halfway through. Suddenly, he was pulled back to reality. It turned out that Whale Shark had a secret territory near Weilong Mountain, but a century ago, an unwelcome guest had arrived unexpectedly. This guest had set up a barrier in his territory, preventing him from entering. Although Jian Wushuang had joined relatively late, he had heard some rumors about this secret territory. He didn't think much of it at first, but hearing that someone had occupied it a century ago and set up a barrier, it was a mysterious powerhouse. A century ago, Jian Wushuang took a deep breath. This made him want to confront Wu Li. Wu Li had disappeared into the depths of these mountains a century ago. The cause and effect were right here, but they couldn't locate Wu Li's whereabouts. He even suspected that the other party might have perished. Now, Hearing about Whale Shark's situation, he couldn't help but wonder if that mysterious powerhouse might be Wu Li. But then he thought again, Whale Shark had over 600,000 divine power, even approaching 700,000. Yet, he couldn't break through this mysterious person's barrier. Based on strength alone, it didn't seem like Wu Li. Jian Wushuang knew Wu Li's strength best. At the peak of 450,000, similar to Mukin. To withstand King Whale Shark, the divine power would have to be at least 600,000 or 700,000. This seemed exaggerated. Even if Wu Li concealed much, he couldn't possibly be that powerful. The other party's awareness of the secret of Wanliu's activation might not be simple. Regardless, he had to go and see if it was Wu Li. So, without waiting for the Whale Shark King to finish, he readily agreed. One person couldn't break the barrier there, so mentioning it now meant they needed their help. Together, they would break the barrier. Of course, there were benefits to it. They could share the blessed land. In the past, he wouldn't have been interested in the blessed land. Finding Wu Li was enough. But since witnessing the terrifying power of the Whale Shark King, he felt it was necessary. Perhaps it was truly a rare treasure. It might be very useful to him. What he lacked now were some original treasures to quickly bring his own origin source to perfection in the universe. Preparing for the next tribulation. Perfection in the universe was almost equivalent to the fifth tribulation. Once he broke through the tribulation, he could even cross 5 tribulations at once. A perfect universe had immense power, and his universe C contained the power of the starry sky, making it even stronger. The pressure of crossing tribulations would be much less. His own divine power was strong enough, and he could handle matters related to tribulations. The efforts of the emperor would show advantages in the tribulation realm. The right path was very important. Jian Wushuang was very satisfied with his foundation. When he reached the Universe Master, it would be another period of eruption. Now, apart from his origin source, everything else had been elevated to the limit level, unable to be further improved. Since entering the ancient moon spacetime, he had only improved his divine power a bit, with no other significant changes. This would change once he became the Universe Master. Once he became the Universe Master, he would soon be able to return home. After making an agreement with the Whale Shark King, the 5 of them would set off together. The time was set for half a month later. During these days, they wouldn't go out again. They needed to prepare well. Although he could guess that it was very likely Wu Li inside, others didn't know. They all thought there was a monster hidden inside. Actually, it was not the case. The Whale Shark King and Mafu King obviously knew more. The Catfish East and the Rushing Tyrant knew nothing. They were likely to be deceived. He had been getting along well with them these days, and if he had the ability, he would lend a hand. Returning to the cave with Li Shang and others, Jinchen had completely adapted to the role of a servant girl now. Seeing Jian Wushuang and Li Shang return, the others quickly prepared some tea and fruits. Li Shang casually lay on the stone bed, suddenly sober, and remarked, "Jian Wushuang, you don't really believe in that Whale Shark King's words, do you?" Jian Wushuang felt relieved to hear a coherent sentence from him. "I always feel that guy is unreliable. It's better to be closer to Mafu King. He promised me that after this success, he'll give me that maid." Upon hearing the last sentence, Jian Wushuang sprayed the water he just drank all over. Wiping his mouth, he scolded, "Lord Li, are you planning to take a concubine here? Do you treat Weilong Mountain as your home?" Even the 2 young disciples from the Li family felt their ancestors' behavior was embarrassing. Li Shang sounded somewhat aggrieved. "The Empress has abandoned us. We have to move forward. It's been over 100 years. Even if her only task is to give birth, she could have filled a basket by now. When will it end?" This remark made Jinchen's expression difficult. The thought of their mother saddened him deeply. The past century felt like an eternity, not because of suffering, but because there was always something to do. It wasn't like in Yu Kingdom where one could casually enter seclusion for 1,000,000 years. Things were more casual there. Even with Jian Wushuang's protection, there were still tasks to fulfill here, lest suspicions arise. Everyone was the same. They did what they needed to do. No need to wait. "Maybe in half a month, we'll have to leave," Jian Wushuang declared. Li Shang exclaimed, "Is there any news about Her Majesty?" "No." Jian Wushuang shook his head. "Then where are we going?" Li Shang asked, somewhat disappointed. "To where we should go." Living people couldn't be stopped by urine. Since the Empress hadn't contacted them, they would move forward on their own. After all, they were now in the guise of wild beasts. Perhaps others could reach the finish line faster. Upon hearing this, they fell silent. For 15 days of leisure, Li Shang had been pondering his own origin source. Over the past century, he had obtained many treasures of origin source, almost all of them picked up for free. They threw everything into the primordial universe. The number of black holes in the universe had reached 9,900. Only 100 black holes were left. 10,000 black holes were the limit of the universe. It was also the perfection of the universe, the beginning of all things. This was also the beginning of the universe. The universe was just a shell. Inside, there had to be everything. There had to be light. There had to be darkness. There had to be life and death as well. That would be a complete universe. But all of that had to wait until he became the universe master. For now, the key was to first elevate the origin source of the universe to perfection. Just one step away. The treasure was no longer necessary. What was needed were some special opportunities, like the bat territory mentioned by the whale shark king. Perhaps his opportunity lay there. It would also be a chance to confirm whether the mysterious strong figure hiding inside was Wu Li. Killing two birds with one stone. 15 days passed in the blink of an eye. The day of assembly arrived, with the Bat King personally leading the team under the guise of inspection. They left Weilong Mountain. This time, Jian Wushuang brought everyone along, ready to flee if necessary. If he wanted to find Wu Li, there was no need to stay in Weilong Mountain. When the time came, he would follow Wu Li and plan the Wanlu. The Empress's path was blocked, so they would take another route. He refused to believe that Wu Li had no other preparations. For this sacred meeting, Wu Li had probably planned for a long time. But he lacked sufficient bargaining chips. Opening Wanlu required the power of life. Wu Li probably didn't have much. Everything depended on him. After leaving Weilong Mountain, Jian Wushuang had a lot on his mind. Distracted for a moment, he failed to notice that someone was already watching him from behind. The gaze was narrow and ancient. From the main peak of Weilong Mountain, King of the River, TMU King watched each and every one of them. Hundreds of people in total. Whale Shark, it seems you're still unwilling. TMU King sneered inwardly. Even if you reach the 5th tribulation realm, you're still under my pressure. I want to see what you're hiding. The demonic bats and whale sharks leading the group were unaware that their plan had been exposed. Any sanctuary, as long as it had a guardian, would have hidden treasures. Except for Jian Wushuang, because he joined the group relatively late. This was a well-known secret, and even TMU King turned a blind eye most of the time. But anything that could threaten him, he could see clearly. Sangamo, weren't you always looking for the human cultivator who stole your dragon egg? TMU King pulled out a communication stone and continued. I found him for you. He's right here. TMU King even revealed the location of the sanctuary hidden by Whale Shark King. Far upstream, Sangmo was still frantically searching for Jian Wushuang and the others. Upon receiving TMU King's message, he immediately set off for the mountains under the river gorge. Besides Sangmo, there was also an ancient boat heading towards the mountains under the river gorge. It was a group of human cultivators, and it was the Sure Kingdom team that Jian Wushuang was quite familiar with. This time it was truly bustling. People gathered from all directions. There would definitely be a storm brewing. The first to arrive at the location of the sanctuary was Jian Wushuang and his group. Outside the sanctuary, Jian Wushuang didn't feel anything special. If he could perceive it, then this place wouldn't be considered a rare sanctuary. Whale Shark King took out a token and opened the sanctuary, and everyone leaped inside. This is the outskirts of the sanctuary. That guy is inside. Whale Shark King led the way with everyone following. Upon entering the sanctuary, Jian Wushuang immediately sensed a peculiar aura. That aura? Jian Wushuang frowned. But deep down he shouted, "The power of life!" He could hardly believe it. There was actually the power of life here. If the human cultivators were to find out, they would probably all rush here. Wait a minute! Jian Wushuang felt something was amiss. The powerful observers from outside could see them. That meant the ancient Wood sect had completely controlled the entire infinite great world. If there were truly the power of life here, they would have likely been plundered long ago. Why would it be their turn? But there truly was the power of life here. He wielded the power of life. How could he not know? So, there was only one possibility left. This blessed land had been isolated. Isolated beyond the boundaries of the infinite great world. That's why the ancient Wood sect's experts couldn't detect it. This speculation could explain everything. Jian Wushuang couldn't believe that the ancient Wood sect would be so generous as to leave life forces here. After all, the ancient Wood sect was now the one in dire need of life forces. The true king, Tmu King, was on the verge of death. He couldn't even produce the life force the other party needed. After becoming the universe master, perhaps he could restore vitality to the 8 Tribulation. But now, even if he were drained dry, he couldn't help the 8 Tribulation realm experts. There was a fundamental difference between the 7 Tribulation and the 8 Tribulation. There were many 7 Tribulation experts in the ancient Wood continent. But 8 Tribulation experts could be counted on one hand. The former Qishan fell at the 8th Tribulation. Any expert who could transcend the 8th Tribulation was undoubtedly unique. During his time as a Tao Lord, he could restore the origin source and vitality of 6 Tribulation experts. As Emperor, he could restore the 7 Tribulation. But to restore the 8 Tribulation, even low-level universe masters couldn't do it. He only had the strength and foundation when he reached the 5th Tribulation. 8 Tribulation experts could reverse the rules and incorporate their own universe into their bodies. This was going against the grain of the rules. The 8th Tribulation was already the pinnacle of the ancient moon spacetime. It wasn't as simple as they had thought. Deep within the blessed land, the closer he got to the core, Jian Wushuang felt the immense power of ancient life force. Life had its variations. For instance, the life force he condensed was acquired, while the life force here was innate. In other words, it was the life force from some unknown powerful being leaking out. This reminded him of Wanlu. The branches of Wanlu contained a similar life force. Could Wanlu be hidden inside? He shook his head afterwards. If that were true, it would be too unrealistic. It was highly probable that these were branches left behind by Wanlu. If it truly were Wanlu, it would possess a vitality even greater than this. It would surpass even Wanlu that 8 Tribulation experts couldn't break. It would be a super relic comparable to the ancient moon ruins. Some experts speculated that if Wanlu could be activated, the ancient Wood continent would instantly become one of the top 3 in the ancient moon spacetime. It would only be surpassed by the black and white heavens. It's easy to imagine how crucial the treasures and opportunities within the Wanlu are for the entire ancient Wood continent. Clearing his mind, Jian Wushuang approached, but as he touched the barrier, he was promptly repelled. He staggered back several steps before steadying himself. This barrier is indeed extraordinary. His current divine power hovered around 550,000, yet it was still not enough to breach it. To enter, would one need 1,000,000 units of divine power? Even if they all joined forces, he doubted they could break through. Whale Shark King must know this well. He wouldn't have brought them here without some assurance. There must be a way. Mafu King spoke up at this moment. Whale Shark, stop teasing us and reveal your plan. All right, I'll be direct. I possess a treasure that can significantly amplify divine power. However, it requires 800,000 units, a feat I cannot achieve alone. But together we can inject our divine power into it. Once it reaches 800,000, this artifact will activate, unleashing 900,000 or even 1,000,000 units of divine power. After the Whale Shark King finished speaking, everyone except Mafu King was stunned. Entering with 800,000 divine power and coming out with 900,000. That was too miraculous. Even Jian Wushuang had never heard of such a thing. Li Shang, who had a broad knowledge, was also taken aback. Such a miraculous treasure actually exists? Cababan exclaimed in astonishment. Whale Shark King chuckled. It's also thanks to my good luck. I obtained it by chance. However, this treasure can only be used once. Once used, it will be damaged. I once got a weakened version of it, and after using it once, its internal source disappeared. No wonder, if it could be used continuously, the value of this treasure. Jian Wushuang shook his head, marveling at the existence of this treasure. Truly, there was no end to the wonders. If such a treasure could be continuously used, needless to say, everyone could understand. It would be a top treasure comparable to the innate universe treasures. Similar to the beast god on Jian Wushuang's body. His beast god weapon, regardless of the stage, was the strongest treasure that boosted his strength. Back then, in the Moro spacetime, Qixin had slain all 9 beast gods. He refined 9 beast god weapons. His candle dragon was just one of them. Back then, the Qixin's luck was also good. They grew fast enough. He surpassed everyone in one fell swoop, slaying the 9 beast gods and even refining the divine weapons of the beast gods. When it came to the Mrop spacetime, the treasures there were even more abundant than in the ancient moon spacetime, especially in terms of quality. They were innate universe treasures, abundant enough for even the emperor to use. Among them were temporal treasures as well. He felt that the Qixin temple possessed not just one temporal treasure, but possibly more. The Qixin temple itself was likely a temporal treasure. Initially, Qixin only refined the origin source inside, which could be considered an improvement on the original temporal treasure. Furthermore, the universe sea within the Qixin temple was also controlled by Jinling using temporal treasures. This time, Fan Tianfeng, accompanied by the Flame God and several 7 Tribulations realm scattered tribulation experts, went to the Qixin temple for the temporal treasure. When such a treasure appeared, even 8th Tribulations realm experts would come out to seize it. Meanwhile, on the side of Whale Shark King, they had already brought out that treasure. The crowd gathered around. Their subordinates were all outside the formation set up by Whale Shark King. The 2 juniors from the Li family, along with Jinqin, were also outside. Only Li Shang had come in. Li Shang's strength was not weaker than that of a guardian. He just hadn't ascended yet. But his status was similar to that of a guardian, so he came in. Having one more person meant an additional assurance. In total, there were 6 people, and even the weakest among them had a divine power of over 500,000. Once they all erupted with their full power, converging into one force and infusing their divine power into this treasure. As long as they reached a total of 800,000, they could unleash a divine power of 900,000. With a divine power of 900,000, only TMU King himself could wield such strength. By the standards set in the past, 300,000 was the threshold for the 3rd tribulation, while 400,000 was for the 4th tribulation. 600,000 marked the threshold for the 5th tribulation. The disparity between the 4th and 5th tribulation was significant, and the gap between the 5th and 6th tribulation was even greater. The universe masters of the 6th tribulation realm were not inferior to the scattered tribulation of the 7th tribulation. In other words, they could unleash 1,000,000 units of divine power. At that level, surpassing a realm was much more difficult than it is now. Even if TMU King did not possess the power of his original universe, his explosive divine power still reached 900,000. In other words, the combined divine power of him and his companions could unleash attacks at the level of the 6th tribulation. Everyone, let's begin. Whale Shark King took the lead in elevating his aura. Starting from a baseline of 600,000, the Whale Shark King's power surged directly to 680,000. Transforming into their true forms, Whale Shark and Mafu spread their wings, their divine power reaching 700,000. Jian Wushuang and the others didn't hold back either. They all unleashed their peak powers. Of course, Jian Wushuang only unleashed 600,000, not reaching his limit. He always felt that both the Whale Shark King and Mafu King were not good characters. He needed to keep a trick up his sleeve. The 6 of them leaped high into the air, floating halfway up, their hands gathering power towards the treasure below, injecting a large amount of divine power into it. 12 beams of light converged into the treasure. The power of the treasure gradually increased from the beginning. The treasure already contained 700,000 units of divine power. Now they only needed to add another 100,000. However, this 100,000 divine power required at least 3 individuals with 700,000 divine power to inject. Of the 6, only 2 barely reached 700,000. Whale Shark King once again raised his divine power, reaching over 680,000. Jian Wushuang could tell that the opponent had not yet exerted their full strength. The peak should have around 700,000. The remaining 4 barely constituted a force equivalent to 700,000 divine powers. The boundless divine power took a full 15 minutes to gather. Yet, the divine power within that treasure only increased to about 780,000. Still lacking 20,000. Everyone, just a little more effort. Let's go. Whale Shark King took out several divine power fruits and tossed them to the group. As they released their divine power, their divine bodies had already begun to weaken. They were all waiting for Whale Shark King to produce treasures to restore them. Seeing the divine power fruits, everyone didn't hesitate to grab them and swallow them whole. Buzz! Jian Wushuang was shocked by the potency of the fruit, as it erupted with about 500,000 divine powers when swallowed, restoring him to his peak state. The beams of light emitted from his hands enlarged once again. The divine power within the treasure instantly surged by 10,000. However, the further they progressed, the more difficult it became. From 780,000 to 790,000 divine powers. After reaching 790,000, it only increased by about 1,000 each time. After 9 consecutive attempts, they were stuck at 799,000 divine powers. Whale Shark King once again produced divine power fruits. The group erupted once more. This time, each time could only increase by 100. Jian Wushuang frowned, finding it somewhat exaggerated. Even if condensing divine power in the later stages would be slow. Couldn't possibly be this slow, right? The treasure was indeed special, but not so special as to be this difficult during the charging phase. He had seen plenty of treasures before. He had even seen 2 temporal treasures. But this treasure before them not only was activating its special, even advancing through the stages was so cumbersome and difficult it raised suspicions. There must be some reason they didn't know. Whale Shark King probably hadn't told them the truth. There was definitely concealment. The divine power of the 6 individuals was once again depleted by more than half, only able to maintain their original selves, when the treasure was finally complete. 800,000 divine powers. We did it! Whale Shark King's face lit up with joy. Then he turned to look at Mafu King. Now their divine powers were all very weak. If someone were to suddenly attack at this moment, it would be... Jian Wushuang had just begun to suspect when a terrifying aura rose behind him. It was the Whale Shark King. But in an instant, Whale Shark King restored his divine power to 600,000. He had first come behind Jian Wushuang intending to deal with him. But Jian Wushuang had his own countermeasures. How could he foolishly be unprepared? His divine power surged directly to the peak 600,000. Without waiting for the opponent to make a move, he suddenly turned around, clasped his hands together, and struck out with a seal, directly sending the Whale Shark King flying. But over there, Nianyu Dong didn't have any backup plan. He was directly enveloped by the wings of Mafu King and completely swallowed. Cababan, the big-head fish, was utterly terrified. He never imagined that his backer would suddenly turn against them. He stood frozen in place. At this moment, Li Shang also regained his senses, the origin in his body circulating, restoring his divine power almost completely. After all, with the origin source universe, recovery was much faster than pure ancient beasts. Li Shang, who had overdrawn his origin source to recover, immediately stepped back to avoid Mafu King's sneak attack. Let's deal with Cababan first, the Whale Shark King, who had been pushed back, reminded. They were also very shocked to find out that Jian Wushuang and Li Shang both had hidden strengths. It wouldn't be easy to deal with them later. Originally, his plan was to fill the treasure with divine power and then kill the others. As for the barrier of the blessed land, They didn't want to waste this treasure to break it open. Instead, they wanted to invite TMU King to decipher it. Then they would use this treasure to ambush TMU King. The plan was calculated accurately, and if this treasure was truly activated, it wouldn't just unleash 900,000 divine power, but a full 1,000,000 divine power, enough to kill the TMU King. This was their true plan. But they hadn't expected that Jian Wushuang and Li Shang had been hiding something. They could only deal with the others first before negotiating with Jian Wushuang and the rest. Cababan's divine power had reached its weakest point, and he had no ability to retaliate against Mafu King. He could only stand foolishly in place. The Mafu King extended a finger, unleashing a black light. This black light contained 600,000 divine powers, enough to kill Cababan. Jian Wushuang's candle dragon wings suddenly trembled, appearing beside Cababan in an instant. With a kick, he sent Cababan flying, dodging the black light. "What are you standing there for? Run!" Seeing Cababan still not reacting, he quickly reminded him. In these days, Cababan had been quite considerate towards him, always lending a hand when needed. "I won't forget your kindness. Wait for me. I'll go find the king." Cababan transformed into his true form, swaying his body, and burst out with incredible speed, attempting to flee the sanctuary. But before reaching the exit, a dragon's roar echoed. Soon after, a massive black dragon rushed in. With a single sweep of its tail, it sent Cababan flying back. Where are the human cultivators? The dragon was none other than Law King Sangmo from Weilong Mountain. He directly transformed into his true form and swiftly arrived at the scene, his blood-red eyes fixed on the group. Struggling to get up from the ground, Cababan could no longer maintain his true form, reverting back to human form. Seeing Law King Sangmo, he shouted for help. "Law King Sangmo, you've arrived just in time. Mafu King and the Whale Shark King have betrayed us. Please kill them." Sangmo was momentarily stunned. But then he could not help but burst into laughter. He had just slaughtered a group of beasts from Weilong Mountain outside. His actions now weren't much different from betrayal. After all, TMU King had snatched his territory. He never had any good feelings towards the people of Weilong Mountain. It was just a matter of resigning from his position. Seeing the infighting within Weilong Mountain, he couldn't help but laugh. How could he possibly lend a hand? "Sangmo, your timing couldn't be better. Why don't we join forces to kill these few riffraff, then go deal with Weilong Mountain? The three of US brothers can rule together. Why bother caring about that toad's face anymore?" The Whale Shark King knew that today's events had definitely been exposed. He could only stabilize the situation first. But his tricks could only fool Cababan and the others. Sangmo was an old monster who had lived for goodness knows how many years. How could he believe such nonsense? "Whale Shark, I've long seen through your treachery. I thought you would wait until the fifth tribulation realm to rebel, but I didn't expect you to dare to attract the attention of the old toad in the fourth tribulation realm. Truly admirable." Sangmo had no interest in Weilong Mountain, nor did he care about the Whale Shark King's plan. Right now, he only wanted to find the humans who stole the dragon eggs and kill them all to ease his anger. Those dragon eggs had been nurtured for who knows how many years, only to be stolen by someone. Even their lair on the shore was wiped out. If he didn't avenge this, he might as well not live. "Your plans I don't care about. Right now, all I want to know is if there are any human cultivators hidden inside this barrier." With that said, he raised his hand to attack the barrier. After birthing the dragon egg, his divine power experienced a brief weakness, but now it had returned to its peak. He possessed a formidable divine power of a full 720,000. A punch landed on the barrier, yet it remained unchanged. "Don't waste your effort. You can't break it." The Whale Shark King shook his head. He also wanted to break the barrier, but he needed the assistance of TMU King's divine power. The mysterious strong individual hidden inside wasn't exceedingly powerful. It was just that the barrier was too special. But Sangmo couldn't care less. He sensed a trace of life force inside. There was definitely something hidden within. What do we do now? Mafu King couldn't decide. Jian Wushuang was in the same predicament. Cababan and Li Shang were both waiting for Jian Wushuang to speak. Given Jian Wushuang's character, he should have left this kind of situation long ago. But he couldn't just let go of the life force inside. And the person hidden inside was likely Wu Li. Wu Li still carried that wooden sword crafted from the Wanlu willow branches. If they just left like this and the barrier was broken, Wu Li would be in trouble. This isn't right. Jian Wushuang suddenly realized something. Jinshin was still outside. But Sangmo said to kill everyone outside. This is bad. Li Shang also realized. He quickly took out a token with several sound transmissions on it. Danger! 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 Jian Wushuang didn't care about the others anymore. He turned around and tried to leave. Where do you think you're going? Whale Shark King wanted to intercept at this moment. He was also afraid that Jian Wushuang would return to Weilong Mountain and inform TMU King of what happened here. With both having 600,000 divine power, Whale Shark King could hold him back. With a flutter of wings behind him, Jian Wushuang dodged the attack. Heading towards the entrance, he flew. Taking out the token from his sleeve, there was no plea for help above. A chill ran down his spine. Jinshin was merely an emperor, albeit strong, at best comparable to a second Tribulation Realm expert. Sangmo, however, was a fifth Tribulation Realm expert, capable of extinguishing Jinshin with a mere breath. This place isolated causality, to the extent that even the people of the ancient Wood sect couldn't peer into it. He couldn't sense Jinshin's aura due to the isolation of causality. He could only leave first, using causality to probe Jinshin's aura. Just as he reached the entrance, his figure froze. An ancient aura swept over. A bow of an ancient boat appeared at the entrance, followed by a terrifying aura that directly shattered the entrance. The entire warship entered this paradise. Human cultivator. King Whale Shark and Mafu King's expressions changed drastically upon sensing the incoming aura. Within this vast aura, there were 2 universe masters at the 5th Tribulation Realm. There were even 104th Tribulation Realm universe masters within this massive aura. And each of them was tremendously powerful, far beyond ordinary savage beasts. Even the weakest among them could rival the guardians of Weilong Mountain. They all began with a divine power of 500,000. The key were those 2 universe masters at the peak of the 5th Tribulation's realm. Both were at the pinnacle of the 5th Tribulation's realm. They were not comparable to half-hearted beings like the Mafu King. Originally a bit crazy, Sangmo, upon seeing so many human cultivators, felt his eyes narrow. Now it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about whether they could make it out alive. Cababan's face also showed despair. In a fight between savage beasts, there would be no possibility of survival. But when encountering human cultivators, only death awaited. Li Shang was also taken aback. Then he suddenly realized that he was also a human. But now, in this ghostly appearance, neither human nor ghost, how could he face anyone? When Jian Wushuang, who had been pushed back, lifted his head, his brows relaxed, because he sensed Jinshin's aura, right here on this ancient ship. It seemed he was still alive. That was enough. Returning to Li Shang and Cababan's side, he whispered, "Don't rush to take action. There's still a chance." This sentence was said to Cababan, and also to Li Shang. In the current situation, when human cultivators descended, the first targets to deal with were Mafu King and Sangmo. They had nothing to do with them. Moreover, this place was isolated. For the human team to accurately find this place, there must be a special mission. Buzz. As the ancient ship landed and stabilized, a large flag fluttered. Everyone also saw the flag clearly. Sure Kingdom. Jian Wushuang's eyes twitched. He never thought it would be such a coincidence to encounter the team from the Sure Kingdom. Enemies meet on a narrow road. Offending Sure Jiu was a small matter, but in the Sure Kingdom, he had also offended some powerful Sure clan members. They might even be on this ship. If he showed himself, not only would the other party not give face, they might even give him trouble. However, Jinshin had already boarded the large ship of the Sure Kingdom, unaware of the situation. The ship came to a halt. Countless auras rose from the deck. 2 universe masters at the 5th Tribulation Realm of the Sure Kingdom, 1 male and 1 female, stood at the forefront, and Jinchen prostrated himself before them. Shizhou also knelt beside him. Elder, Jinchen had no other choice but to transform into a savage beast. Please spare him. Shizhou knelt on the ground, pleading bitterly. The female expert at the fifth tribulation realm of the Shi Kingdom frowned and said coldly, Shizhou, don't forget, she is a married woman. By protecting her like this, you're disgracing the face of our Shi Kingdom. Since she has abandoned her human identity, she's no different from a savage beast. Another fifth tribulation realm expert from the side stepped in to mediate. After all, Shizhou was Shixiu's grandson. Some face had to be given. Jing Lian, let's prioritize the mission. Why bother with the grievances between these juniors? Let's quickly investigate the situation here and report back to the ancient Wood sect. Our mission will be considered complete then. Jing Lian snorted coldly, ignoring Shizhou, and said indifferently, Shi-san, I'll give you this face, but don't forget, in the infinite great world, everything must listen to me. Her words were extremely domineering. Shi-san felt somewhat dissatisfied deep down. This Jing Lian woman was just a guest of the Shi Kingdom. If it weren't for the Shi Kingdom's support, she wouldn't even have had the chance to compete for the position of saintess in the holy meeting. She might have died outside long ago. She was originally a foster daughter of an elder of the Shi Kingdom, but now she dared to suppress the descendants of the Shi Kingdom sections. Naturally, there was some dissatisfaction, but for the greater plan he could only endure. Waving his hand to signal Shizhou to quickly take Jinchen away, he didn't say anything more. The mission of the Shi Kingdom's team this time was quite simple. It was to investigate the situation here. Because after Jian Wushuang and his group entered, everything was cut off. The ancient Wood sect felt something was amiss, so they sent the nearest Shi Kingdom team to investigate. When the two fifth tribulation realm universe masters of the Shi Kingdom investigated, they were startled. As for Mafu King and Sangmo, they were utterly disregarded. Once the investigation was done, it was convenient to kill them off. But this investigation left them dumbfounded. It's the power of life. Jing Lian's face showed shock, but Shi-san was overjoyed. The power of life is like icing on the cake for the universe master. But for those undergoing tribulation, it's like a timely help in adversity. The Shi Kingdom had quite a few strong dispersal tribulation experts. If they could seize the power of life here, then this sacred assembly, even if not chosen as the Holy Maiden, would not have been in vain. Let's kill these small fries first. Shi-san and Jing Lian acted together. Shi-tian, take people to deal with those fourth tribulation realm savage beasts. Leave these two to us. Jing Lian directly ordered everyone, each to their own tasks. Jian Wushuang secretly felt something was wrong, so he retreated with Cababan and Li Sheng. Oh, they found the power of life. He originally thought the other party wouldn't be so sensitive, but they still discovered it. Then they definitely won't hold back and will surely slaughter all the savage beasts here. Jian Wushuang, should we proactively reveal our identities? Li Sheng began to fear, but Cababan couldn't quite understand Li Sheng's words. Jian Wushuang shook his head and looked at Li Sheng. This place hides great secrets. They won't let us go. Have you forgotten about the experts of the Celestial Wolf clan? When they first entered, their biggest opponents were even among their companions. Now, exposing their identities will only lead to a quicker death. Not revealing their identities was crucial. At least they could align themselves with the side of the savage beasts, leveraging the power of Mafu King and the Whale Shark King. If they were exposed, both sides would hunt them down. Well, at least none of those at the fifth tribulation's realm pursued them. Just some universe masters at the fourth tribulation's realm came. Those they could handle. Li Sheng also realized that they could only rely on themselves at this point. Brother Cababan, have you asked the Emperor for help? Jian Wushuang thought of the River King at this moment, a special life form at the sixth tribulation's realm. If they could involve that one too, then this battle would become lively. They, as insignificant as they were, could also take advantage of the chaos. Cababan swallowed hard, murmuring, I've sent the message, but there's been no reply. Send another message, tell him there's life force here, and there are fifth tribulation's realm cultivators of the human race. Tell him to hurry over, or else the treasures will all be snatched by human cultivators. As long as there were enough benefits, no River King could sit still. With his strength, it was difficult for him to perish within the infinite great world. A special life form at the sixth tribulation's realm. No different from a universe master at the sixth tribulation realm. Just lacking their own Tao arena. Those at the fifth tribulation's realm were the same. Who could bring their own universe here? That's the advantage. The human race couldn't threaten TAMU. Once he arrived, even if he couldn't sweep the entire area, he could repel the Sure Kingdom's troops. As for Jinchen, there was a high probability she reconciled with Shurjiu. Following the Sure Kingdom's troops was much better than following him. With him, there's a high probability they'd still wander. As long as the Empress didn't come out, they would be on tenterhooks. Moreover, after he found Wu Li, he would definitely not stay here and would continue to move forward. At that time, it would be more dangerous. Jin Chun was different from Li Shang. Their strength was also different. If Li Shang died, he wouldn't even bat an eye. However, if Jin Chun died, how would he explain it to the Empress and Queen Yunji? Although there was a high chance that he would no longer have anything to do with the Yu Kingdom. However, Queen Yunji was a universe master at the seventh tribulation realm, so they might have more interactions in the future. He couldn't offend or disappoint her. Now, Jin Chin had reunited with her little man, and the two of them were living a shameless life. Jian Wushuang was also freed. He had no scruples. He spread his wings and spiraled into the sky. His divine power directly increased to 650,000. The fourth tribulation experts of the Sure Kingdom were stunned. TSK, you think you can catch me? Jian Wushuang's candle dragon claw rose slightly. It exploded with godly power that shook the world and forced dozens of universe masters at the fourth tribulation realm back. Shi Tian, who was leading the group, could not help but vomit blood. He had suffered quite a few injuries. Perhaps it was because Li Shang had turned into a desolate beast, but his attacks were especially ruthless. He took the opportunity to attack. Cababan's divine power had yet to recover, so he could only watch the two of them kill in all directions. Brother who, I don't want to say this, but how much strength have you been hiding? Cababan was dumbfounded. Seeing that the usually wretched Li Shang was able to kill in all directions, he felt a little itchy. He rushed forward and casually grabbed a heavily injured Sure Kingdom expert to deal damage. Mafu King was delighted when he saw that Jian Wushuang was almost done fighting before they started. Whale Shark, don't use that move yet. Maybe we still have a chance. 3 against 2. The advantage lay in the desolate beasts. The Whale Shark King could also be considered a fifth tribulation realm expert. They all had a backup plan. The divine power they had just consumed had all been recovered now. Cababan looked around and finally understood. Everyone had a backup plan. Anyone could quickly recover to their peak. Only he himself was nothing. However, when he thought of Nian Yudong, who had already fallen, he still had someone to die with. Ha! Whale Shark King and Mafu King burst out at the same time, rushing over to face the strongest Jing Lian. The remaining Shi San is naturally given to Sangmo. The two sides instantly engaged in battle. Trembling ripples erupted, enough to shatter a third tribulation realm expert. Jian Wushuang was not idle either. After all, there were 104th tribulation realm experts in the Sure Kingdom's team. Other than some who had to protect the emperor, all of them were mobilized to attack Jian Wushuang and the others. Shi Tian burned his divine power and shouted angrily, "Attack together! Kill that big-headed fish first." It was one thing to be beaten up by Jian Wushuang. That fat-headed fish actually dared to hit him when he was down. Taking advantage of his weakened divine power, he came up to attack. He even specialized in slapping faces. You can't stand it. Jian Wushuang's divine power was as high as 650,000, and none of the universe masters at the fourth tribulation realm were his match. 5 times the beast god power, he could be considered to have used it to the extreme. He wore the candle dragon inner armor and the general's armor together. He directly ignored their attacks and single-handedly took on 100 people. Every universe master in the fourth tribulation realm was able to get close to him. The strongest Xianxia only had 600,000 divine power. Even if he burned his divine power, he was not as powerful as Jian Wushuang. Moreover, Jian Wushuang's divine power was almost unlimited. Given enough time, all 100 universe masters at the fourth tribulation realm would have died. However, these people had also learned to be smart. They began to take turns fighting. Moreover, they would split up to deal with Li Shang and Cababan. In this way, Jian Wushuang would be cautious. Li Shang and Cababan were chased by more than 10 universe masters at the fourth tribulation stage. The key was that Cababan's divine power had yet to recover. Even if he revealed his true form, he wouldn't be able to resist so many universe masters. Brother Cababan, quickly eat this fruit. Li Shang took out a fruit of divine power from his mustard seed. Brother Li, you've hidden your strength well. Cababan was overjoyed and said excitedly, "Ha! My divine power recovers quickly, so I can't bear to eat it." The two of them could still laugh when they were being chased. Jian Wushuang felt that the two of them were too ambitious. "You guys find a chance to go out first. Don't worry about me." He turned to remind the two. It would be best if they could leave first. Anyway, he couldn't help much here. It would be best if he escaped back to Weilong Mountain. That place was at least safe. No matter how powerful the human team was, they would not be foolish enough to go to the nest of a sixth tribulation realm special life form. He punched back the universe masters who were rushing at him, and then he stopped the universe masters who were chasing after Li Shang. "Stop chasing. Your opponent is me." Jian Wushuang floated in the air and exerted force with his candle dragon arm, causing the wings on his back to shake open instantly. The dozen or so universe masters who were chasing after them all retreated. "Get into formation and kill them." Xianxia was anxious. The 9 universe masters at the fourth tribulation realm had already formed their formation and rushed forward. 9 battle formations were gathered one after another. The headless and faceless man held the supreme treasure in both hands and rushed toward Jian Wushuang. "For real?" Jian Wushuang frowned. When the arrays were combined, each array formation had 600,000 divine power. Including Xianxia, there were 10 super experts with 600,000 divine power. Even though his divine power was 650,000, it was still a little strenuous. It was difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. Now, he could not use the candle dragon wings to force them back. They could only fight close to each other. In the battle, he was attacked from both sides. 600,000 divine power landed on his body. Even if it was weakened a lot, it would still hurt. Boom! Jian Wushuang relied on his speed to dodge the attack of one battle formation, but the next battle formation rushed over. He did not have much time to react. Xianxia held a war hammer in his hand and stood at the periphery, waiting for an opportunity to move. Jian Wushuang tore the sky with his claw and repelled 4 battle formations. He then turned around and faced the other battle formations. However, just as he turned around, a figure appeared behind him. Xianxia. He had been looking for this opportunity for a long time. Seeing that Jian Wushuang was distracted, he immediately rushed forward, raised his war hammer, and smashed it on Jian Wushuang's head. Boom! The huge blow sent Jian Wushuang flying from the sky to the ground of the Blessed Land. This commotion was not small. Mafu King also noticed it. He had thought that he would have a chance if it was 3 against 2, but he realized that he was far from being a match for them. Whale Shark and Mafu were suppressed by Jing Lian even though they joined forces. Sangmo was not any better. He did not even have the ability to fight back after being beaten by Shursan. Now, he realized that Jian Wushuang's side could not hold on any longer. They were completely panicking. However, they still had a trump card. That supreme treasure that was already filled with divine power. If it was used on the other party, it could definitely kill them instantly. However, this treasure was meant for King Tianmu. If he used it now, the plan was completely ruined. They actually did not have any conflict of interest with the human team. If he really couldn't do it, he would just slip away first. That treasure must not be used unless it was absolutely necessary. However, the situation was getting worse and worse. They had to consider escaping. Li Shang and Cababan slowed down when they saw Jian Wushuang being shot down. "Do you think, brother, who can withstand it?" Cababan asked worriedly. "He should be able to." Li Shang blinked and said vaguely, "Sure Kingdom worship." Several quadruple tribulation realm experts were watching the battle from above the deck. In addition to quadruple tribulation realm experts, there were also many triple tribulation realm experts and several emperors, including Shi Jiao and Jinqin. Jinqin did not reveal Jian Wushuang's identity. Seeing Jian Wushuang being ambushed by Shi Tian, her heart sank. The reason she had been able to survive all these years was because of Jian Wushuang. Even if she had many opinions about Jian Wushuang, she could still distinguish between what was important and what was not. Seeing Jian Wushuang being besieged, she was also worried. Being ambushed now, her strength had weakened. She couldn't bear to watch anymore and revealed Jian Wushuang's identity to Shi Jiao. "What? That's Jian Wushuang!" Shi Jiao exclaimed in shock. Jinqin nodded. She didn't understand why Jian Wushuang didn't reveal her identity and instead fought against the strong warriors of the Shi Kingdom. Wouldn't it be better to reveal it? But Shi Jiao understood. If they revealed it, they would likely face attacks from all sides. So they couldn't say it. When he was defeated by Jian Wushuang, he still had confidence in catching up to her. But when he knew that Jian Wushuang, as an emperor, was facing 100 quadruple tribulation realm experts, that confidence was completely shattered. He would never be able to surpass her in his lifetime. To him, Jian Wushuang was not just an opponent but an enemy. However, this opponent was worthy of respect. He couldn't forget how Jian Wushuang had given him the fruit to restore his divine power. Moreover, Jian Wushuang had been protecting Jinqin all along, a fact he could discern. Therefore, he decided to assist Jian Wushuang, seeking help from the ancestors. Shi San, who was ruthlessly attacking Sangmo, paused when he received a transmission from Shi Jiao. He turned his head towards Jian Wushuang's direction. At that moment, Jian Wushuang was slammed into the ground. The 9 great formations rushed forward, leaving Jian Wushuang no chance to catch his breath. They intended to deliver a fatal blow. Stone Tian took the opportunity to hammer Jian Wushuang relentlessly. The protective feathers of the candle dragon wings managed to block most of the attacks. Yet Jian Wushuang was still shaken, coughing up blood. The recent blow had even blurred Jian Wushuang's consciousness. With a groan, Jian Wushuang finally regained consciousness, bloodshot eyes brimming with anger. He had initially held back, but these people were relentless in their desire to see him dead. He couldn't allow this to continue. "Get lost!" A strong surge of energy repelled the encircling formations, and Jian Wushuang's wings trembled as he soared into the sky once more. "You've provoked me." Sensing someone charging from behind, he struck back with a claw, tearing through the formations. Blood stained the claws of the candle dragon. Watching all this from afar, Shi San's eyes flickered. Then he glanced in the direction of the warship. Shi Jiao, ranked in the top 3 among the contemporary emperors of Shi Kingdom. He was also Shi Xiu's grandson. His future was limitless. Unfortunately, he had fallen for the Princess of Unation, someone who could have easily satisfied him. But then Jian Wushuang appeared out of nowhere, disrupting everything. It further plunged Shi Jiao into a period of desolation. Later, after Jinqin and Jian Wushuang's grand wedding, Shi Jiao finally managed to come to terms with it. He once again unleashed his potential, surpassing numerous geniuses and emerging as the rising star of the future universe master of the Shi Kingdom. Seeing Jinqin again, his resolve visibly weakened. Witnessing Jian Wushuang's formidable strength only added to his dismay, feeling inadequate compared to Jinqin once more. This was not the demeanor Shi San expected from Shi Jiao. He considered letting Jian Wushuang go. He hesitated, but, for the sake of the family's prodigies, he couldn't let go. Shi Jiao hadn't anticipated that his good intentions would incite the ancestral elders of the family to harbor murderous intent towards Jian Wushuang. With a glint of coldness in his eyes, Shi San transmitted to Shi Tian. "Quickly kill this person, and then come to help me deal with this dragon." "Yes." Shi Tian swung his war hammer and began instructing the 9 great battle formations, preparing to combine once more. The 9 great battle formations converged. Jian Wushuang was momentarily stunned, thinking they were about to attack together again. But he realized the 9 great battle formations were actually beginning to merge. Slowly, they coalesced into a super formation. And the leader of this super formation was Shi Tian. "You beast! Prepare to meet your end." The formation emitted a cacophony of voices, extremely awe-inspiring. One hand wielded the war hammer, the other shattered defenses. Divine power reached a staggering 700,000. Jian Wushuang felt an immense pressure. With just divine power alone, he stood no chance. His divine power began to decline gradually. 600,000, 500,000, 400,000. Once it stabilized, Jian Wushuang tore off his disguise, revealing his true appearance. Dressed in a black robe, he carried an ancient blue divine sword on his back. His long hair billowed, partially obscuring his sword gaze. The super formation also came to a halt. At this point, some had already recognized Jian Wushuang's identity. "What do we do?" Everyone paused. Originally, they were hunting a savage beast. Now they realized that savage beast was Jian Wushuang. For a moment, they found it hard to accept. How could they continue this fight? Why even fight at all? But Shi Tian didn't care about such thoughts. He shouted loudly, "It's just an illusion created by this beast. Don't let it cloud your judgment." Jian Wushuang's presence was revealed. Everyone saw it. Shi San noticed it too. But no one intervened. Their silence was tacit agreement. After all, this was the infinite great world. If someone died, there was no one to blame but themselves. Seeing Jian Wushuang exposed, Li Xing felt like Jian Wushuang was ready to negotiate. But what followed was just as Jian Wushuang had warned him. The strong of Shi Kingdom wouldn't hold back. They wouldn't spare them just because they were of the same race. In the outside world, disputes didn't spare kinship. On the contrary, the greatest enemies of the human race were often their own kind. Those special beings had never considered sparing them. It was always the human race invading the domains of those special life forms that led to hostility. Cababan, upon seeing Jian Wushuang's true identity, hesitated for a moment, but he chose to believe Shi Tian's words. In his eyes, Jian Wushuang was just a savage beast. No different from him. They were brothers of a kind. Otherwise, why would Jian Wushuang save him? "It's all fake," Cababan muttered to himself, his speed increasing once again as he tried to leave this place quickly, to return to Weilong Mountain and bring the king, to sweep away everything. On the deck of the warship, Shi Jiu's gaze gradually dimmed. He sensed the killing intent. His fists clenched tight, but he couldn't change anything. He lacked the strength, and his remaining identity couldn't stop the patriarch. Jinqian's eyes turned red, unable to look anymore. Mafu King and the others were also shocked by Jian Wushuang's identity. However, Sangmo noticed that Jian Wushuang's aura was somewhat similar to the aura of the strong individual who had attacked the warship before. Anger surged in his eyes, yet he couldn't break free. Otherwise, he would have to resort to devouring Jian Wushuang alive. Amidst the countless gazes, Jian Wushuang remained silent, refusing to beg for mercy. Jian Wushuang revealed his true form. Contrary to what these people thought, he didn't intend to seek reconciliation by relying on his identity as a member of the human race. Things had escalated to this point in the fight. There was no reason for peace talks. By revealing his true form, he naturally intended to wield the Wanjie sword. Clang! At this moment, silence spoke louder than words. The moment he drew the Wanjie sword, it represented his course of action. He was ready to continue the battle. Dual sword slice. Jian Wushuang's hands crossed. One hand symbolized life, the other death. Black and white swords, soaring into the sky, straight into the formation below. The starry sky chart hovered in the air. Since his divine power couldn't match up, he relied on his origin to defeat the opponent. "Bring it on!" Shi Tian wielded his war hammer, mocking, "Watch as I crush your skull." With that, he swung the hammer, meeting Jian Wushuang head-on. Buzz! The sword clashed with the hammer, producing a deafening sound. Clang! Jian Wushuang's figure pierced through the formation, his hands trembling uncontrollably. Snap! The Wanjie sword fell from his grasp. The recent clash had numbed his hand, and his divine body was trembling. Only his origin source remained resilient. The power of the starry sky filled his entire body. The ancient transformation had never weakened, but he couldn't hold onto his own sword. In that one strike, he lost. Is that all? Xianxia manipulated the formation, turning around to taunt. How do you expect to defeat me? With a divine power of 700,000. Incredibly formidable. At the pinnacle of the fifth tribulation realm, Jian Wushuang was truly no match. He had almost exhausted all his resources. Even his current one-thought universe was only useful for escape, unable to subdue the opponent. Jian Wushuang's armor enhancement wasn't enough. Now he was left with his last resort. As for his ancient monastery jade urn, it only contained 700,000 divine power. Even if he used it, he couldn't defeat the opponent. After all, the opponent already possessed 700,000 divine power. Moreover, he didn't want to rely on the ancient monastery jade urn to defeat the opponent. He wanted to defeat his opponent with his true strength. Buzz! Stabilizing his wrist, a burst of thought power erupted from his palm, retrieving the falling Wanjie sword back into his hand. As long as he held the sword, he had absolute confidence. Even if the opponent had 700,000 divine powers, he still had confidence. The first two sword moves of the Starry Sky Chronicles, he had already comprehended them perfectly. The power of death, he had indeed learned a lot from Mieshang. And life could also be reversed into death, could help him comprehend the true meaning of death. So what remained was integration, just like the fusion of divine power and origin source. Both were extremely difficult. The super-ancient transformation required him to become the master of the universe in order to have hope of creating it. The third sword move of the Starry Sky Chronicles was the same. It required him to reach the realm of the universe master. The combination of death and life. The Reincarnation sword. Jian Wushuang closed his eyes, facing the onslaught of battle once again. He split the mountain with one sword. After another round of combat, he could barely hold his ground. But he was still at a disadvantage, not a match at all. Sword, representing slaughter and sharpness. Encountering the war hammer, perfectly countered. One force broke all laws, no matter how powerful his swordsmanship was. Without sufficient strength, it was useless. Jian Wushuang's hand gripping the sword shattered, along with his arm. If only his divine power could merge with the ancient variations, he wouldn't be this fragile. But using divine power meant he couldn't unleash the power of the starry sky. Damn it! Jian Wushuang clenched the sword, still unwilling to accept it. He lunged forward again. With each collision, his flesh and divine power shattered. Soon, there was no intact part on his body. Even though he recovered quickly, the opponent's hammer strikes were faster. There was no flesh left on his arms. His fingers snapped one by one. Yet he still held onto the sword, never letting go. Persist. Be resolute. Jian Wushuang relied on these 2 points to reach this day. The powerful beings of the fifth tribulations in the distance all paused. They wanted to see how this legendary emperor would fall. The whale shark and Mafu met each other's eyes, naturally replenishing their divine power. But Sangmo didn't think so. Jian Wushuang must die, and he must die by his hand. Humankind, you should die by my hands. Sangmo's true dragon form rushed out while San was distracted, heading straight for Jian Wushuang. San had intended to intercept, but he realized the opponent was targeting Jian Wushuang. He sent a random message to Xianxia. Let the wild beast kill him. No need to dirty your own hands. Jinchen was still watching from the warship. If the Shi kingdom killed Jian Wushuang, it might provoke resentment from the Yu kingdom, although she didn't care. But to eliminate a scourge with the help of others, that was the best outcome. Xianxia controlled the battle formation, pounding Jian Wushuang with each blow, not yet satisfied. But upon hearing the patriarch's command, he had to stop. Kid, I don't even need to kill you myself. Seems like you have quite a few enemies. Tian sneered coldly and stepped back. And at this moment, Sang Mo also charged forward. Li Shang and Cababan, who were about to escape, saw Jian Wushuang about to fall and stopped their movements. Cababan didn't deceive himself either. The Hu Biao he knew was indeed a human. There was no time to call Tmu King now. Even if Tmu King came, he couldn't save Jian Wushuang. Brother Li, go and save yourself, Cababan said, then turned and rushed towards Jian Wushuang. Li Chang shouted anxiously, You foolish fish, are you going to your death? He couldn't understand why Cababan, a savage beast, would go to rescue Jian Wushuang. But they had a friendship of 100 years. Was it really necessary? Leaving him alone standing at the entrance of the cave, neither leaving nor staying. His thoughts twisted. He thought of what he had to protect. The backbone of the family had collapsed. The Li family only had him, the universe master, left. He couldn't go to his death. With this in mind, he dashed out of the sanctuary without looking back. Cababan, on the other hand, exerted all his strength, rushing from the entrance of life to the entrance of death. Originally, he could have chosen to escape, but he couldn't bear to see someone who saved him go to their death. His master had died like this, and his master's wife had also left. His martial brother even died by his hand. He didn't want to live in guilt anymore. Who, my friend? I'm here to help you. His true form, shaking its chubby body, rushed towards Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang heard the shout and instinctively turned to look. Randomly, he angrily shouted, Go away! You dead fish, you've come just in time. Tian's face lit up. When they hadn't formed a formation, this fat fish had often beaten him. Now was the chance for revenge. Lifting his war hammer, he blocked Cababan's path. Boom! The war hammer struck Cababan's fish head. Even though his skull was tough, it couldn't withstand the force of 700,000 divine power in one blow. Cababan was immediately dazed. His vision began to blur. Tian lifted the war hammer again and struck down once more, causing Cababan's huge fish head to cave in completely. Such a big fish head, yet so fragile under the hammer. Tian hadn't had enough, but his opponent couldn't hold on any longer. With extreme disappointment, he kicked Cababan's spine, scattering his true form all over. The huge fish head fell right in front of Jian Wushuang.